What do you want me to
Verum.
call you?
Verum.
It says, what is it?
Verum.
Darum. Okay, Darum. Got you. Or Verum?
Yeah, verum. Latin for
Verum.
truth.
Verum. Okay, Verum. Verum.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right, Verum. I'm gonna debate now, and we're gonna start with the affirmative. For
Mm-hmm.
what's the Coco? What's the
The
Affirmative.
proposition is going to be.
You gotta change the picture.
Really quick to
They
make
got
sure.
to take the picture.
Looking
Yeah.
at my
Change the
notes.
picture so that we can see the display here.
Oh yeah, let me
my.
change.
Okay, why is Ori still up here? Like, Ori, please.
Oh yeah, Power.
Affirmative.
We are gonna have to drop you, but we might bring people up later.
Me
Okay.
and I are just.
And the topic
What is up with my chin in that picture? What did that do to my chin? And my
Oh.
lips? What's up with my lips? Did you fatten my lips in that? Did you give me a Botox injection in that?
No, it was AI.
I know. I'm just joking.
Using Sora.
Sir, you are looking good in that picture. That is a grizzled good looking beard.
Yeah, honestly, I like these. I like these AI pictures. They're great. This
It's
is
like
actually-
old timey too.
I love it. I love it. I love the whole style and everything. This is something that you should keep doing, Coco.
Finally,
Yeah.
I got a new
That's
pretty
pretty cool. I hope everyone enjoyed the promo. There was like lore and some stuff about the
I
Euclid
was
cards.
happy.
Yeah, no, the promo was really good. Like this time around, like it was like the best that I've seen so far. So you're doing better and better every time. It's great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like the verses pictures. Those are pretty good. Like each one was done pretty well.
Yeah. I might use the name Cocomania in the future. We'll see. But yeah. We'll see.
I just changed my name, so why not?
All right, so let's get started.
Hold on. Before
And-
we start,
yeah.
Cindy, me, and A are up here because we are co-hosts.
Well, okay, so all right, so then we could start off with the affirmative. The topic is: did Jesus rise from the dead?
So
Oh yeah, I remember
that's-
Sarah talking about
So,
this.
so the affirmative is going to be Verum, and Verum, you're gonna have 5 minutes for your opener. You can start whenever you say your first word. I'll start the timer whenever you say your first word. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm Barum. I live stream on here 3-4 nights a week. I usually debate scientific and historical stuff. I'd like to thank Coco for allowing us to debate this on his live on this platform. The resurrection, which is a very important, critical point in all of Christianity. And as the Bible says, 1 Corinthians 15:14, and if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain. So just take, even the Bible says, if the resurrection didn't happen, it's all in vain. So the top evidences, the top testimonials for why the resurrection did happen, first off, is the trustworthiness of the Gospels. There has never been another archaeological discovery. There's never been an archaeological discovery that's disproven anything in the New Testament, even the Old Testament. The Gospels are trustworthy because we have the most manuscripts going back closest to the said events, and we could date the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, to 40 to 60 AD. We know this because we can look at the book of Acts, the second part of Luke, the third of the Synoptic Gospels, and we can see it doesn't include the destruction of Jerusalem. It doesn't include the unaliving of Paul and Peter, which the whole narrative of Acts is building up to, and it just doesn't contain them. So it makes no literary sense whatsoever why they'd be disincluded. So we know what happens before that. Acts quotes Matthew 3:11, so we know that Matthew had happened before Luke, because Luke is the first part of it. Luke talks about in the beginning of his gospel that there is other gospels besides mine. So we know that these are dated before at least 62 AD. And we also have 1 Corinthians, the creed quoted there in 15, verses 3 through 7. Also in 1 Corinthians 11, we have them quoting Luke 22, which shows that these gospels came before, which, 1 Corinthians is typically dated about 50 AD. So we know that these gospels are dated earlier, so very close to the set event, which builds its trustworthiness for eyewitness accounts. So any supposed changes that we could see over time get discounted by the fact that the Gospels were translated very quickly into multiple languages: Syrian, Coptic, Arabic, obviously Greek, and it's stretched within the end of the first century. It's stretched to the end of the Roman Empire, even into India. We know this. We have archaeological evidence. We see the spread of that. We see the numbers grow. It just extrapolated out. We understand that these Gospels were translated very quickly. So if there was any changes to any of the Gospels, any changes to any of the authorships, of the Gospels, then we would know like there would be a falsifiable one, because we know that the authors of the Gospels are who they are because there's no competing authors. We know that the Gospels are trustworthy because if there was a change made in one that developed over time, a supposed development, a legendary status development of a resurrection, we would see the differences between the different regions. We're talking about thousands of miles of difference between different Gospels, and they all harmonize when we look at them, and they all attest very, very closely. Like the only differences are penmanships, vowel, and synonym differences. They're not actual textual differences. And the small amount of differences we can see, we know we highlight in current translations, the end of Mark, and the one chapter in John. We look at those, we know that those are not in the earliest manuscripts. So the Gospels are trustworthy. So when we look also at the conversion of James, the brother of Jesus, through the early Gospels, we see that he does not believe that Jesus is the Christ. He doesn't believe he's God. His family thinks he's crazy. Then by the end, you see James proclaiming his faith in Christ. We see that in the Bible, and we see that in a testimony from the only historian of the time. There is no other historian in Judea, first century Judea. There's only one that comes a little bit after the life of Jesus who brings this all together, and that's Josephus. And we understand that there's passages that have Christian interpolations in there, but we also understand that even atheists, even non-Christian scholars like Gezi Vermes, John Dominic Crossan, E.P. Sanders, Louis Fieldman, Paul Frederickson, Bart Ehrman, none of these people Christian, they all agree to the fact that Josephus says that Jesus lived, that he was unalived, he was crucified. His followers believe that he was raised again. Is that time? What? Oh, sorry. And so you raised again. So we understand that even those non-Christian scholars believe that there's some truth to that testimony. Plus, we have another way to verify what was written in Josephus. And also, James has talked about in Josephus how he was a follower of Christ and also was martyred to his death. So the next obvious evidence is all the disciples going to their death, their unalivement, believing in Jesus. These are people who were afraid, who hid, who denied Jesus throughout the Gospels. Embarrassment clause, giving more historical credence to this. And they all go to their death believing in Jesus risen from the dead when they could have just lied to get out of it. The first testimony of Jesus was given to women, the most untrustworthy people of the time. Like there's no court case where you're going to put a woman up there in the stand of first century Judea. And the very last piece of evidence, physical evidence, is the Shroud of Turin. The scientific evidence was thrown out because there was a carbon-14 date done in 1988.
Time.
Okay. I thought it was going to go faster than that.
That concludes the opener for the affirmative. Now the opener for the opposition. Sir, you can start whenever you say your first word.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Coco. Thanks, Joe. Coco, I appreciate you hosting it. Joe, I appreciate you coming up to debate this topic. Today we're going to be discussing the resurrection. This is a topic that's played a major role in my own journey away from Christianity. This issue matters deeply to me because examining it critically is one of the reasons why I ultimately concluded that Christianity is false. I imagine it holds equal importance to my opponents and to most Christians, though for very different reasons. Either way, I think it is a discussion worth having. My goal today is to demonstrate that the resurrection is extremely improbable and that there are better, more likely naturalistic explanations that account for the available data. Let's begin by clearly laying out two separate hypotheses. Hypothesis one, this is going to be the hypothesis my opponent defends, the resurrection hypothesis. That's that Jesus rose from the dead and his followers witnessed him manifest and appear in front of them bodily. Hypothesis two, I'm going to dub the naturalistic hypothesis. This is going to be the hypothesis that I'm defending. And this would account for all explanations that do not involve a resurrection. This would include theories such as the body being stolen, the disciples experiencing visions or hallucinations, people fabricating accounts, or an early belief in a purely spiritual resurrection. While some of these may be more plausible than others in accounting for specific data points, all of them as a collective is more likely than a resurrection. This gives my opponent a steep hill to climb. Now, you may ask, why is hypothesis 2 far more probable than hypothesis 1? Well, first, hypothesis 1 suffers from an incredibly low prior probability. Billions of people have died throughout history, and we have no well-documented cases of anyone coming back from the dead. Even if my opponent claims there are a handful of such cases, he would still have to concede that if Jesus did rise from the dead, it would be an extraordinarily unprecedented event. By contrast, hypothesis 2, that's my hypothesis, draws from phenomena we know occur. People hallucinate, bodies go missing, people lie and embellish details. And there are examples of Jewish groups at the time that believed in a spiritual, non-physical resurrection. These events are well tested and far more common, given hypothesis 2 a much higher prior probability. Now, let's consider the posterior probability. That's going to be the probability after we examine the evidence. The only first-hand claim we have of seeing the risen Jesus comes from Paul, who describes his experience as visionary and internal. In his letters, Paul aligns his own experience with the others who saw Jesus, but he never specifies what they saw or where they saw it. Were these just visions, dreams, hallucinations? Could the experiences be compatible with Paul's own visionary encounter? I think so. Unfortunately for my opponent, Paul doesn't elaborate, so any interpretation beyond that is mere inference. What Paul describes is fully compatible with naturalistic explanations like hallucinations or spiritual visions. Now let's consider how the story develops over time. Paul gives us no empty tomb, no virgin birth, and no detailed appearances, just vague references. Mark, our first gospel, adds an empty tomb, but notes that the woman who discovered it tell no one, a detail consistent with the literary motif. Matthew and Luke expand on Mark's account. Matthew places appearances in Galilee, Luke relocates them to Jerusalem, and Luke's Jesus can even teleport and pass through walls. John goes even further. His Jesus invites physical touch to remove any doubt that this is a literal physical resurrection. The progression is clear. The story grows more physical, vivid, and miraculous over time. The trend makes far more sense if the story is evolving, being added to, than if it were based on a single historical event. And there's more evidence to consider that raises the probability of my hypothesis. We have pseudepigraphia. These are more evidence to consider that raises the probability of my hypothesis. We have pseudepigraphia. These are forgeries claimed to be by apostles, such as 3 Corinthians, the letter to the Laodiceans, and the Gospel of Peter, among many others, showing that forgeries are common by Christians, making up stories and events that didn't actually come from eyewitnesses. The Gospels in the New Testament are anonymous. We don't actually know who wrote them, and they contain geographical errors, factual mistakes, and anachronisms. They contradict each other on key details. We have evidence of later authors rewriting We have evidence of later authors rewriting earlier accounts to fit new theological agendas. And there are examples of interpolations and scribal alterations in the textual tradition. So let's recap. The likelihood of my hypothesis is true is higher than his before we examine the evidence, and the evidence we do have raises the probability of my hypothesis while simultaneously lowering his. The entailment of all this is that my hypothesis is far more likely both before and after examining the evidence. In closing, what I'll say is if Jesus truly rose from the dead, the evidence his followers left behind to convince future generations is quite frankly insufficient. And if that's the best the historical record has to offer, belief in the resurrection simply isn't warranted. That's it.
All right. So that concludes the opposition opener, which with 17 seconds left. So that was good.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have the affirmative 10-minute cross-examination. You can begin any... One second. Hold on. Let me just clear this out. Yeah, you can begin anytime you say the first word. Go ahead.
Hi, sir. How you doing?
Good.
So the time period which you list, the supposed changes happening over time, the added things to the Gospels, how this Christology, this resurrection built. What time period do we talk about? What dates do you give the Gospels, and what time period is this changing over?
Well, I hold a minority date on some of the Gospels. I think Luke and John is 2nd century. But if we want to just stick to kind of what the scholarly consensus is, it's going to be that Luke and John was written at the end of the 1st century. Mark was written sometime around the late 60s, early 70s. And that Matthew was composed maybe 5 or 10 years after Mark. So I would say...
So do you know why that's the scholarly consensus? There is several people who don't agree with that, by the way. Why is the scholarly consensus that it has to be after 70 AD?
Well, I'm not saying it has to be after... I'm not saying Mark has to be after 70. No, I said that the disagreement over Mark right now in the academic circle...
Well, let's stick to the other ones besides Mark. Let's go with Matthew, Luke, and John. Why are they after 70?
Yeah, because Matthew is using Mark as a source, and Mark was written sometime in the late 60s, early 70s. And when it comes to Luke, Luke changes context within Matthew and Mark's gospel when he's copying Mark. That would only make sense if he's writing far enough outside the generation of the disciples existing.
So do you believe that the Gospels are the earliest, the Synoptic Gospels and the John are the earliest Gospels we have? Or do you believe there's ones that are earlier than that? Or you just don't know?
But Gospel Thomas, I think there's arguments that could be presented that maybe put
So
that
that's
in the first century. But
without a doubt dated to way after, like at least second century, mid to late second century. That's a
no, there's
consensus.
there's a lot of disagreement over that
So
actually.
do you remember my argument for why the synoptic gospels have to be between 40 to 60 AD? What was my argument?
Yeah, you relied on the fact that Acts doesn't record Paul's death. I think was the gist of your primary.
What else?
You said that
Record
there's some kind of consensus that says they're reliable or something.
Also, Acts quotes what book? Which gospel?
Matthew, is that what you said?
Yes, Matthew. So it's taught, and then since Acts we know is the second part of Luke's writings. In Luke, we have him saying there are other gospels that people try to make account. So we are referencing the other two gospels, which are everybody goes to scholarly consensus is Mark is the first, Matthew came later. So the scholarly consensus is that Mark and Matthew came first. So if Luke is saying that happened beforehand, so we could kind of conclusively say that logically it doesn't make any sense for them not to include the death of Paul and Peter. Why wouldn't they include the death of Paul and Peter in Acts?
Well, because the point of, I think, Acts is to present a sort of arc about how the gospel got from Jerusalem.
Well, who are the
to
two
Rome.
main characters they're comparing? It's always Paul and who?
Peter.
Peter. That's the narrative. And to all of a sudden this narrative is building up, and all of a sudden it just ends and there's no conclusion. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no narrative sense.
I just gave you my reason. Luke is.
Yeah,
Luke,
I understand, but that doesn't take out what I just said. It doesn't make any sense. Logically, it doesn't fit, and scholars agree with this. The only reason that scholars put the date 70 after is because of the temple. They don't believe that the temple could predict the destruction of the temple, which is in Matthew and the other Gospels. That's why they put it 70. That's the main reason why. There's no good other reason. It's just logical reason.
That's just not true.
Predict it. What's another reason then?
Well, another reason might be that Irenaeus dates Mark's gospel to after the death of Peter. And if you agree with church tradition that Peter died during the Neronian persecution, that would put Mark's gospel in the 60s.
Well, which would put that doesn't fit logically with my argument, because that would put if it happened before death. What was the date of Peter's unalivement? What's the date?
Well, the church tradition is that he died during the Neronian persecution, which would happen in the mid 60s.
Yes, exactly. So it's not included in Acts, which is a huge outline. And people look at this and they know this is like an obvious argument. This is like the most obvious argument for dating it. So let's move on from that. In terms of the Gospels not aligning with each other, are you aware of the arguments that of narrative eyewitness accounts that puts these in harmony? Are you aware of those arguments?
I'm aware of some. I mean, you might be aware of some that I'm not, but
what are your favorite arguments for the Gospels not aligning with each other?
Well, when there's examples of when Matthew's using a pericope in Mark, there's examples of him changing the pericope for theological concerns. One example would be like in the baptism, who Jesus is speaking to. In Mark's gospel, he has this thing called the messianic secret, where Jesus wants them to keep sort of.
I'm talking about inconsistency. So inconsistencies like an event happening. Like I understand there's an argument there for that, but this is not what I'm talking about. The inconsistencies like in the narrative.
Well, that would be an inconsistency.
Okay, so what's Matthew?
Yeah, so in Matthew's gospel, the Holy Spirit's informing the crowd who Jesus is, and in Mark's gospel, the Holy Spirit's telling Jesus who he is. So it seems to be Mark's an adoptionist, and that Matthew's changing the context to make Jesus some sort of deified figure.
Have you looked up the counterclaim to that? Because I remember reading that being totally harmonized, and it makes total logical sense. Like they don't discount each other just because one says that the Holy Spirit did, one says that John says it doesn't mean that it's incongruent. What?
What's the counter?
Well, it does just that if one says it, then the other can say it. It doesn't negate the other. Just because it doesn't say that only the Holy Spirit told the people or only John told the people. It doesn't say that. So you can't put it as a contradiction if it doesn't exclude the other.
You think it happens to just be the case that the Holy Spirit informed to both Jesus and the crowd, and that Mark's gospel leaves out the crowd, and that Matthew's gospel leaves out Jesus? yet Mark is more theologically or has a lower Christology. You just think
It
just
totally
think
makes
that's
sense
more.
that they would put their perspective they want to show. I mean, that's the continuation. That's the obviousness of eyewitness accounts. So J. Werner Wallace, who obviously wrote Cold Christianity, went over several days. He was one of the top cold case detectives in the nation, and he went over all these supposed contradictions and differences. I would encourage lots of people to go over those and look at it. And he's a very objective person looking at it, and it makes total sense. They harmonize with each other. If testimonies were exactly the same, if they said exactly the same thing, you would just think it's it's people copying a direct forgery, and you
Didn't
wouldn't
that
trust the
guy?
testimony.
Didn't James Warner
But
Wallace get denied access to come on Cameron Baguzzi's YouTube for like
that
lying
wouldn't
about?
negate the merits of his argument, no matter what thing you have to say about his
Well,
reputation.
it's just kind of funny that the one person you reference is a non-scholar who's kind of viewed as a
Well, no,
crank.
he's an FBI. He has the experiential analysis with eyewitness testimony. I'd say that goes above any scholar in terms of. But we do have textual criticism, right? So the historical textual criticism for the Gnostic Gospels. Do you understand why they fail historical textual criticism?
What do you think textual criticism is?
I asked you a question. It's my turn to ask you. You can ask me that in your time.
Well, I don't know what it means to fail textual criticism. I don't know what that
Okay.
question means.
Well, in terms of the Gnostic Gospels, first we know they're written later, but in terms of actual analysis of the region, the names listed in them, the Gnostic Gospels continually get the names, the region aspects wrong. When we look at the Gospels, they get the names that are the most popular in first century Judea continually correct, the regions correct, the leaders correct, everything harmonizes. So that's part of textual criticism. It's a very large field, and the Gnostic Gospels all fail that. So they know they can't be dated. In fact, they fit. A lot of them fit with 2nd to 3rd century Egypt. I think you mentioned the Gospel of Peter. Did you mention that one? That's fits the names listed in there match with 2nd to 3rd century Egypt. So I mean,
Yes,
the
I
theories
think.
of 24 all crumbled apart under
Well, the
analysis.
onomastic congruence. Are you asking me to respond to that, or?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. And
Yeah, I
cut through
think there's issues with the onomastic congruence. One issue is that it's kind of not clear what names should be included in the data. Like one example I can think of is in reference to Levi and James's father Alphaeus. Is it the same father or is it two Alphaeuses? Because it seems to be in Mark's gospel he doesn't indicate that they're brothers because he has them separated by Thomas in the list of the 12. So should we count that as two Alphaeuses or one in the onomastic congruence?
So how do you think we know the names of first century Judea?
Well, he uses, I forget the name of the source. It's EL something. It's a gosh, I can't remember the name, but it's like a list
listed, right? We do this analysis. These are all listed. There's obviously there's records. There's people actually physically writing these, Jewish people. There's ossuaries, and obviously we have manuscripts, right?
30 seconds left.
Yeah, but
So
how many names?
all those arguments you said of there being a spiritual resurrection all fall on the Gnostics. That's the you can try to put arguments into Paul, but there's been so much criticism of that, and they don't hold any logical merit. The primary basis for that is the Gnosticism, which you just tried to put a 2nd century book into the 1st century dating before it, which doesn't make any sense at all, and it's not supported by scholarly work at all in the Gnostics. Everybody knows the Gnostics are written 2nd, 3rd, 4th century after, and they're plagiarists.
Yeah, first I have a question real quick. Am I lagging at all, guys, or do you guys hear me okay?
I think you sound fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Yeah, so I would just start by asking Verum, would you consider the resurrection to be one of God's greatest miracles?
I say it's his main purpose, the second covenant. In terms of greatest, I don't know how to measure supernatural power, but in terms of it being its sole focus, the prophecies, everything coming to it, I think it's the most important.
Okay, and all things considered, before examining any evidence to consider, do you think eyewitness testimony should generally be considered reliable?
It depends on if it fits the narrative, if it fits archaeological evidence, if all the tests put against it on secular tests of historical reliability are passed, which they do. In terms of how many manuscripts are written closest at time, the Gospels pass that with flying colors, and we have it in different regions. So if there's any changes to any of the Gospels, any supposed edits to them, we will see that because they're separated by literally thousands of miles.
Yeah.
So how could you harmonize them? And they all harmonize in all the different regions.
Well, what I'm asking though, if let's say, assuming all that, if we have eyewitness testimony, would you of an event occurring, would you consider that eyewitness testimonies be good probability raising evidence for the event?
I just gave you the measurement of how you would analyze eyewitness testimony, because we obviously know eyewitness testimony could be wrong, but we
Yeah,
measure
well, right, but
secular
I'm just
methods
asking if you
to
think
test.
I'm just
What?
asking if you think it's probability raising. That's all I'm asking.
It depends. Again, it could be somebody lying. We have to test it.
Right, it could be somebody lying, but would it still be probability raising? Would it still be evidence that should be thoroughly considered?
It's literally data that you have to look at, and you could falsify data and negate
Okay,
data.
great.
And because if it's falsified, then you have to throw it out. Like the P isn't, you have to throw it out, right?
So if you're, let me just give you a scenario and tell me what you think. If you're like mom or someone close to you told you that their friend won the lottery, would you tend to believe them?
Yeah, it's my mom, of course.
Okay. What if your mom told you that she saw someone walking around that was risen from the dead?
I would have to say, well, did the Lord come back? I would have to like look at that a little bit more closely. But I'd still like, my mom is very trustworthy. I haven't thought of a time
Right.
she ever lied to me. So yeah,
Sure,
you
but
shouldn't
would
have
you
picked my
agree
mom.
with me? Would you agree with me that the first statement you would be more likely to believe than the second?
Yeah,
Okay, so I think by that we can say the priors for the resurrection are going to be lower than the priors of winning the lottery. So we have to, I mean, would we both agree
prior
the
to you mean
chance,
like the story believability?
the likelihood that an event occurs before we look at the evidence?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
Would you?
one is supernatural event that's happened literally a few times in history according to the Bible, and the other is
Yeah.
something that happens regularly.
So it sounds like you agree that the priors of the resurrection are going to be really low.
Well, yeah, you would have to, because this is an event that who can do this, raise the
Perfect.
dead but God, right?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Now let's take a look at some other eyewitness testimony that we have in antiquity. Do you think Vespasian cured the blind, attested to by many witnesses, according to Tacitus and Suetonius?
Well, we know Tacitus gets many facts wrong, and if we look at all of mythological ancient texts, we do see that there's lots of miracles, lots of different things added to them, right, to give the character credence. But in the Gospels, we just don't see that type of same writing. We see embarrassment clauses. We see people painting themselves bad. We just don't see a mythological hero building miracle thing. We see somebody who humbles himself down. We see Jesus humbling himself down. We see the actual disciples embarrassing themselves. It doesn't match the narratives of all these other ancient manuscripts.
So it sounds like you don't think that miracle occurred, and your sort of symmetry breaker is that it's not as reliable as the Gospels, right?
Yeah, just the way it's written. We can test it. Tacitus is known to get things wrong. He's not been proven right. His historical reliability, for instance, with the Pilate stone, he got the position of Pilate wrong, whereas the Gospels got his position correct. So we know his Tacitus is not the most reliable.
Okay, great.
He also called him Christus.
Yeah. Well, now let's look at another more recent contemporary eyewitness account. So I assume you're not a Mormon, right?
No, Mormons aren't Christian.
Okay. Well, in the Book of Mormon, there's 11 eyewitnesses that sign their name, and 3 of them attest to seeing the angel come down and actually speak to Joseph Smith. And those same witnesses held on to that belief until they died, and they were persecuted. Amongst many Mormons were unalived, and they had to move out of state to get away and escape persecution. So clearly they weren't lying, and we have eyewitness testimony that they literally
put
saw.
Under threat of death?
What's that?
Were they put under threat of death?
Well, yeah, Mormons were, sure. Yeah, there's a big event. I think
those specific people, were they? To me, you could just put it like they're embarrassed. They want to leave. They were forced to sign this clause and they get the heck out of town, right? Whereas the disciples stuck in town. They stayed in town. They didn't, and they fearlessly preached with persecution right there. And they fearlessly preached with persecution right there. And obviously being terribly afraid throughout the rest of the story, right? And denying Jesus multiple times. These people who lacked faith in his brother all of a sudden changed over. So it's complete opposite of the story you see.
Wait, you get to sort of control the narrative on your turn. So this is my turn. What disciples do you think were put to death for what they believed specifically?
Well, Stephen, Paul, Peter, we know Thomas was. There's other ones. Bartholomew have like more, I think, elaborate stories, but we can know that they were put to death.
So Peter was unalived during the Neronian persecution, according to the church, and that had nothing to do with him being Christian. The reason why Nero targeted the Christians was because they were a scapegoat to blame the fire on. according
Yeah,
to
we knew that.
historians. So it's not as if them disregarding the belief in the resurrection
What about
or them
Stephen?
recounting the belief in the resurrection would have saved them. Stephen's only recorded in one source. That's going to be Acts. That's
No.
the only source that records Stephen's
Oh
death.
yeah. Acts. But
Okay.
that doesn't. I mean, why was he unalived?
I don't know.
The
I don't
Bible
think
says
Acts-
it. Acts says. I mean, don't you know? Acts says it.
Yes, I know it's in. I just told you that. I said it's in. That's the only source that records it.
Who approved of his death?
The Pharisees.
The Sanhedrin, who was and the Pharisee who agreed to it, Saul at the time, approved it. He was given letters to arrest people, and he also approved, as he says.
Yeah,
at the
but
end
this
of Acts,
is again.
the
This
death of
is
Stephen.
this is all in Acts, and it's going to be contentious how historical we should take Acts. But
Oh, we should definitely
let's-
take Acts historical.
I know that's going to be the case you can make on your cross. Okay. So the issue with Stephen is that we only have one person recording his death. Now you mentioned James. I think James's
Yes.
death in Josephus, book 20, has nothing to do with him being Christian. The reason why James
Actually,
was
it does. It
unalive-
says he's a follower of Christ. Yeah,
no, it doesn't say that, and it does. No, it doesn't say that.
it does
says
actually
he's the
say
brother-
that. We
It
can
says
pull
he's
up.
the brother. It says he's the brother of
Oh, yeah,
Jesus,
brother
the
of
one
Christ.
with.
Right. But why was
The
he put to
brother
death? Right.
Why do you keep cutting me off? This is my turn to ask questions.
Right. Apologies. Go ahead.
Like, understand how this works, okay?
I agree with you.
Yeah. So it says
That.
James is the brother of Jesus, the one called the Christ. It does not say he was unalive for being Christian. It says he was unalived because this guy that had a vendetta against him claimed he broke the law, and that upon this he got people together to stone James to death. It has nothing to do with him being Christian, nothing to do with his belief in the resurrection.
So we do know from other historical documents that James did come to believe in the Christ. His book obviously led people to believe that, and so there is more to that. I'll look into it further, Josie. But that James is put to death for that reason, stoned for that reason, just like other Christians were at the
Yeah.
time. stoned
So
for
if you're
believing in
talking
Jesus.
about Hegesippus records James' death, but his version contradicts Josephus, and Hegesippus is much later. What Hegesippus claims is that James was thrown off the temple, and then he survived the fall, and then got up and proclaimed Christ as he was clubbed to death. Now, to me, if I compare the two historical accounts, given that one has theological motive, being a Christian source, and that one is more extraordinary, I think it's pretty obvious which one is embellishing on the details to me.
Well, definitely wouldn't
That's
be
gonna be
embellishing. Even non-Christian atheistic scholars agree that James was put to death for that reason. And I'm not talking about Bart Ehrman. I'm talking about the other ones that I listed.
No,
We'll
they
go
don't.
through them. Joseph Geza Vermis, John Dominic Crossan, E.P. Sanders, Louis Feldman, Paula Fredrickson, all agree that that's the reason why James was put to death, not that fringe understanding.
Yeah,
that you have.
even the Christian person, the Christian historians that's kind of did extensive research on this would agree that the only two you can point to that you have good historical basis for is going to be James and it's going to be Peter, right? Putting Paul aside, because they would agree Paul as well, but I don't think Paul had direct epistemic access to
Well,
it.
just because something isn't written attested to in history doesn't mean that if something's written about in one source and people decide to try to discredit that, that doesn't negate it happening, right? There could be some, Justin Martyr, embellishing it a little bit. We understand that happens.
Yeah, but you can't claim all these people, these disciples, were martyred when there's no record of it. You can't just throw
There's
that out.
there's actually no ancient competing theories. These are all modern theories post-analysis. All the people at the time believed it happened. So all these recent theories have come from people with axes to grind and try to deny that these actually work. Their evidentiary support is just logical arguments to try to base it upon. And the evidentiary support, obviously, there's not a lot of it. So we can only base it on the few literary references we have. And if everybody at the time agreed upon it who lived at the time, nobody was trying to deny it, then we could say that the probability for it being true is more likely. The embellishment, sure, that could happen. But the fact that they went to...
It's time. Try to wrap it up, please.
Oh, yeah, I'm done. If Sir wants to make one point. Yeah. Because I took some of his time.
Yeah.
No, I think I was done.
Okay, great. All right, so that concludes the opposition cross-examination. Now we go to the affirmative, which is going to be the last cross-examination for the affirmative. We will start the timer as soon as you say your first word. Go ahead.
Okay. Did you understand my argument of how we can know If you mentioned the gospel authors not being known, you mentioned that there are changes made over time. Do you understand my argument of how we know if changes happen, how we could falsify that?
And we can look at the manuscript tradition to
How
determine.
so?
We can look at the manuscript tradition to determine what changes were made.
In what way?
I don't know what you're asking. That's all.
Okay, so my argument was, I'll just restate it. It's okay, it's hard to keep track of everything. But my main argument against all changes, against supposed authors being different, is that the Bible is very early, and this is across the board, scholars agree on this, translated into multiple different languages, Syrian, Coptic, Arabic much later, but Greek obviously, and it spread throughout the stretch of the Roman Empire within the 1st century. We know this. So if one was changed early on in that tradition, you wouldn't expect that exact same change thousands of miles away to be harmonized, right? So the Gospels harmonized, and there's no competing authors at all in any of the Gospels. In fact, of all the biographies at the time, 150 years plus 150 years minus of Jesus' life, there's 90 to 100 of them. Only 2 actually list the authors, but there's no other competing authors for contention of the Gospels. Everybody agrees in all the different regions, thousands of miles apart, that these are the 4 authors of the Gospels. There's no competing theories anywhere. Until modern times, people are trying to put this in. So if nobody disagrees and they're thousands of miles apart, how do they all come to the same conclusion if they're changing things?
Yeah. So the primary source that's going to be used to sort of denote authorship is going to be Irenaeus. So all the people you're referring to that quote unquote agree are relying on Irenaeus, and Irenaeus is getting his information from this guy called Papias. Now Papias denotes who wrote Mark and who wrote Matthew. But what's interesting is it's pretty obvious.
When did Papias write? So Irenaeus is getting from Papias. When did Papias write?
Yeah, sometime in the early 2nd century. It's pretty obvious that
Early 2nd century. So I'm talking about just the 1st century. We know that they translated and the gospel started stretching to the ends of the Roman Empire by the end of the 1st century. Now, sure, the manuscripts we have are much later, but that's because manuscripts only last 100 years because they're written on animal skin and papyrus, right? So we know they don't last that long. That doesn't negate the fact that they were written much earlier. So if they're all harmonized, how do people thousands of miles apart, if these are written in the 1st century, my argument is very strong. I think your argument is very weak on that they're written 70 or later in the 2nd century. How would they have been able to harmonize? Your whole contention is based upon the Gospels being dated much later.
I was trying to answer that question.
I'm trying to finish my question. Then go ahead.
Well, yeah, but that's the question I'm trying to answer. So the reason why they all agree on the authorship is because they're getting their information from Irenaeus, who's getting his information from Papias. And Papias,
that's not true because Papias written in the 2nd century.
Where's Irenaeus getting his information from then?
I'm not. There's obviously a gospel tradition. The Gospels are dated before Papias writes, right? So Papias is writing in the 2nd century, and he's listing specific things about Matthew, Mark. There's also another Hebrew document I think he references. It could be Aramaic, obviously, because that's a Hebrew language. But that doesn't negate the fact that the Gospels are dated before that, by all the points that I just named. And you didn't really counter any of those. And there's very strong arguments that scholars agree. Nobody tries to debate. Only the debate they put up is that Jesus couldn't possibly have predicted the destruction of the temple. And that's the main argument for dating them later.
Yeah, that's just not true. I mean,
and then how would all the Gospels have stretched to end the Roman Empire by the end of the 1st century?
Because they're all referencing Irenaeus, who's writing at the end of the 2nd century.
What comes first, 1st or 2nd century?
Irenaeus is not referencing stuff from the 1st century.
I'm just saying. So we're talking about the transcription of the Gospels into different languages. They're passed on to the ends of the Roman Empire by the end of the 1st century. How are they copying a 2nd century writer?
We don't have any examples of the Gospels being quoted by name before Irenaeus. So Irenaeus is the first person.
What do you mean? We know that the Gospels were written in the 1st century. It doesn't matter if you have the surviving manuscript.
You're asking how we know who wrote them. Right? I'm telling you, you're asking why they all agree on who wrote them. The reason why they all agree on who wrote them is because they're all referencing Irenaeus, who's writing at the end of the 2nd century.
I think your argument fails because you're trying to put forth, again, my argument still stands that all these 1st century documents can't be relying on a 2nd century document because of the time it would take to spread that message. And everybody agrees that Christianity spread to the ends of the Roman Empire by the end of the 1st century. Right, so we're talking about Egypt. We're talking about the stretches north. We're talking about all the way to India. We're talking about very far distances, and the gospel is already at these places. And you're saying that they all harmonized after the 2nd century somehow, thousands of miles apart. They harmonized in the second century? I think you're harmonized after the second century somehow, thousands of
Why
miles
do you,
apart. They harmonized in the second century. I think your argument is false. I'm going to move on.
why do you think they
Shroud
were
of
in?
Turin. Shroud of Turin. What?
Okay.
Why do you think
Yeah.
that's not a good piece of evidence for the resurrection?
Well, for one, I take the view that it's a medieval relic,
Why do you think
and for
that?
two, I don't really see.
What's your evidentiary
Well,
support?
because the carbon dating seems to align with the historical record. That would be my
Are
main
you aware
reason.
of the counter argument to that? I mean, you did come in out live with me and sneak some of my argument. Or did you go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead and present it.
So yeah, the argument that the carbon dating from 1988, obviously there was a test done later, FTIR analysis. This is my field, science. I do FTIRs all the time. It's a great way to fingerprint any kind. You can put your finger on the FTIR and get the makeup, the chemical markers on it, right? It's a great way to analyze things. It's like called a fingerprint, literally. So they did an FTIR analysis of the shroud, that the piece tested, right? It was supposed of the same area as the carbon-14, and they found traces of cotton on it, and they found traces of the dyes that would match it with the color. So we know it's a repaired piece on the edge because linen doesn't obviously contain cotton. It's cellulose, doesn't contain cotton. And then there was another test done later with X-ray scattering, which is great science, been around for 100 years, been testing cellulose since the 1960s. It's only been used in textile measurements more recently, the last 10 years. And it measured with very good science, comparing it to other samples of known time periods, 50 Masada, the invasion right there in Jerusalem, comparing those, and the degradation was exactly the same. So it dates it to the first century. Not only that, but all the other evidence
Well,
report of the shroud is outstanding. I mean, I don't
yeah.
know why you wouldn't look at
So I
that.
guess, well, the cotton fiber thing. I know that there's been people that's written in opposition of that says that there was like a study done, and I think it was the University of Arizona that said that the cotton fibers found on the strip that was carbon tested is consistent with the carbon fibers found on the main area of the shroud. There's also in terms of the fingerprinting data you're talking about, like you pointed out, in terms of testing textiles, I'm not aware that that's been used to test any other artifacts outside of the study you're referring to.
No, yeah, it's
And
been
that
known to
study,
test cellulose and the degradation of cellulose since the 1960s. It's a very well
right,
established
but not
scientific method. In terms of dating, the science is good, right?
not in terms of dating artifacts or
Absolutely,
textiles. I mean,
because we can measure the degradation of cellulose. Polymeric cellulose degrades at a known rate. You can account for all the different variables. Those are all accounted for with extreme measure. Like you even give a little bit grace period there, and it still falls perfectly within the first century, and it matches. If you actually look at the FTIR, the X-ray, not FTIR, the X-ray graph of it, it matches. It doesn't match any of the other. They've even done falsifiable different ways to make sure that this test is accurate. This is done by the national, the Italian National Laboratory. They're obviously very good at what they do, and they analyze
but let's say I grant all this what does this do for the resurrection? I don't.
Okay, so the main argument for it is this burn into the image of it, right? That's the main argument. How did this happen? So obviously, it shows unquestionably that this is the Jesus who passed away, because it matches it too closely. Many other ways date it to the first century. It shows the wounds. It matches what the Bible says. It talks about crucifixion. The nails are through the hands. The burn, though, cannot be replicated. The burn, like how often could this image be produced? It's a negative. What would cause this burn? There's no natural phenomenon. There's no known technology existing in the medieval time periods that can produce this. What's your argument?
I get it, but why would we expect the resurrection to cause that sort of?
Because it matches with the story, and God is described as light, and it's such a strange phenomenon that you can't help but look at it and be like, that's amazing. There's actual evidence of Jesus. There's a picture. It's the first selfie ever taken. It matches perfectly. We could see the serum in his wounds healing. We could see the wounds heal. How can a forger fake that?
Yeah, but at best you can just say you don't know what this shows. I don't see how it proves the resurrection.
No, we actually can look at it and say it does show a first century man who was crucified under these circumstances and flogged brutally. He was beaten, just like the Bible says. His nose, his cartilage is broken. His eye is swollen. It's punched. He has the cap of thorns on. He has the spear piercing on his side. We see healing on all the wounds except that. That's the only wound we don't see healing on, and that's shown in the image. We see pollen in the first century. We see stones matching the area. We know it's a Judean man. Because
how does that show a resurrection and not just a crucifixion?
Because the probability of it not being that man is improbable. Then we see the light, the burn on the fabric. What else could cause that? It makes you question, make you look at it and say, this is.
Why would we expect the resurrection to cause it? That's the question.
Well, what else could cause it? People have tried to replicate this even with modern technology, and they can't.
Be one of the things that
we don't have the wattage bulbs necessary to create this UV burn.
Time. That concludes the affirmative cross-examination. Now we move on to the opposition. The opposition could start whenever.
Yeah. So you mentioned. Yeah. So you mentioned that we have examples of in antiquity where writers don't mention their name in the text. Now, are you aware of sort of the general methods that are done by eyewitnesses when they're writing a text to an event they witness, such as using first-person perspective or identifying themselves somewhere in the text?
So, I mean, we have plenty of examples of third-person perspectives in ancient Greco-Roman writings, and we also have, this is more of a biographical reference, so it's written more of a biographical style, so it wouldn't be, in terms of just eyewitness, it would be a biographical writing, which everybody agrees that, I think scholars all agree that it's Greco-Roman biographical style.
Yeah, so when we look at other examples of Greco-Roman lives or biographies, whenever there's an eyewitness in the story, I can only think of one example that doesn't do this actually. Whenever there's an eyewitness to the story, they somehow indicate that somewhere in the text, either by using first-person perspective or identifying somewhere in the text that they're the ones that wrote it.
And I'm telling you,
in every example.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in every example we have.
Well, I'm telling you right now, and I've looked over the people. I don't have their names. I'm trying to find their names, but accumulate these people's writings together. And I can't remember the name of the Greek biographer. He's written like 60 different biographies. We have 40 of them today. He never mentions himself in the writings, and so we have about 90 to 100 of them, and none of them.
Are you talking about Plutarch?
What? Plutarch. Thank you, Plutarch. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Plutarch does identify himself when he's an eyewitness.
Yeah, but in the 40 biographical manuscripts that we have of his, or 30, I think it's 30 or 40, he never names himself.
But he identifies himself as an eyewitness.
Not in the biographical writings he does. He written like 60 he wrote like 60 biographies, and none of them he does.
Yeah, I can give you the name of the reference.
Is it a biography? Because of the ones I saw, there was only a few
these are
given, but there said
the
30. I would have to go look into all of them, but I mean, I didn't see any arguments against this with any scholarship, with any of the biographies having said that his name was Plutarch, and this is just universal scholarship that he doesn't.
It was extremely common. It was extremely common for an eyewitness in Greco-Roman biographies, when they're an eyewitness, to somehow indicate that somewhere in the text.
But he wasn't.
They either switched to first person. They either switched to first person perspective, or somewhere in the text they identify that they're the author, either in the preface or somewhere in the work.
But this just isn't common within biographies. And again, we have 90 to 100 biographies of that time. Only 2 list the author. Only 2. 150 years minus of Jesus' life.
You're just wrong.
No, I think you're just wrong. I mean, textual. I can go find several.
I have several of examples I can give you where.
Are you just talking about individual writings of eyewitnesses, not the biographies? I'm talking about biographies.
Why do you keep? This is my turn to talk.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So here's some examples: Suetonius, Augustus, Book 7; Tacitus, Agrolicae, Book 3; Porphyr, Plotinus, Book 7; Philostratus, Apollonius, Book 6, Chapter 27; Lucian, Demonics, Book 1; Plutarch, Themistocles, Book 32, Chapter 5; Cornelius Nepos, Atticus, Book 17, Chapters 1 and 2; Suetoplius Servus, Life of Martin of Tours, Chapter 24; Posidonius, Life of Augustine of Hippo, Prologue.
That's not a biography. I think that's actually one
yes,
of them.
These are biographies.
I think that's actually the one. That one right there is actually a biography. That was one of the 2. But the other ones, I don't think you could say they're all biographies. Some of those are just histories describing certain events. Yeah. Right.
Okay, give me an example. Give me an example outside of Caesar, who's the anomaly, who's writing a Greco-Roman life, who's an eyewitness as well, that doesn't identify themselves as the eyewitness anywhere in the text. Give me one example.
Eyewitness, yeah, I'd have to go look and see. I don't think that was one of the examples given, but Plutarch is obviously the main example I looked at because he wrote so many biographies and he never included himself. Then I looked at other ones.
There isn't one.
No, there isn't one. There definitely is a third-person writings.
With Matthew, you think Matthew's an eyewitness to the events, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now, in Matthew, when he's recruited as the tax collector. He's an eyewitness to that event, right?
Oh, but he's recruited, yeah, because he's the person recruited, right?
Yeah. And nowhere does Matthew indicate he's an eyewitness or that he saw that event. He doesn't switch to first-person perspective, and nowhere in the text does he indicate he's an eyewitness.
I think that's very
correct?
common from what I've read as scholarship. That's very common in terms of obviously not people mention.
It's not, but you don't have an example, a counterexample.
Yeah, I should have
so
listed them all on.
I don't want to bicker over it too much longer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Do you know where Matthew gets that verse from?
Which verse?
Where he's recruited as the tax collector.
Which verse is it?
I think it's chapter 9, verse 9, I believe.
Okay, I am there. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me," and he rose and followed him.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's from, I have it here. That's copying Mark 2:14.
Yes.
As he was walking along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the booth, and he said to him, "Follow me," and he got up and followed him. Okay?
Well, it's not exactly.
It's the same verse, right?
It's not exactly the same.
Well, there's one difference.
Yeah.
There's one difference, and that's that Matthew changes the name of the tax collector from Levi to Matthew. That's the only difference.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it is the same.
You don't
Okay?
think that Mark had any access to any thing that Matthew might have recorded before that? Like this is obviously the gospel he written, but there's a
No.
little bit of argument for a tradition before that of saying
No, I
Logos to
don't
Matthew.
think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. But even if, why would Matthew, an eyewitness, the only time he enters the story, why would he rely on someone else's book?
It doesn't mean that
not,
he's relying
not
on it.
indicate that anywhere in the text. Hey, by the way, I saw this.
That doesn't really disprove anything. I mean, that's fine narrative. If he's writing a narrative, he doesn't want to embellish himself. The whole point of a counterculture of Christ's message is to be humble and to not, even John doesn't mention himself, right? He says the other disciple, right? So it's just the whole nature of a
that's
person
John
coming to
didn't
Christ
write
is
John.
humble, right?
That's because John didn't write John. That's why. Okay.
But, okay.
So now let's get into what Paul talks about with the resurrection.
Okay.
Okay. Let's get into the Corinthians Creed.
Okay.
So in the Corinthians Creed, Paul lists himself in the creed at the end, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Now, in Galatians chapter 1, verse 16, as well as 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 5.
Okay.
I'm sorry. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 5. Paul indicates that his experience was not something external, yet it was something internal. In Galatians 1:16, he says, Christ was revealed inside of me.
No, it doesn't say
And
that. It isn't the original Greek, which is more correctly. I don't know what version you're using. This in Galatians says, "Pleased to reveal His Son to me in order that."
no, it's
So you would have.
the Greek is actually more appropriately translated as "in."
What's the word?
It's "en."
No. It's spelled N-E-N. Okay, hold on.
Yeah. Okay, and also in 2 Corinthians chapter 12,
Okay.
Paul talks about being taken up to the third heaven, and at the end he remarks, "Did this happen inside my body or outside my body? I don't know. Only the Lord knows."
That's a different
Okay.
experience, right? That's not talking about the road to Damascus. That's what he's referring to when he's talking about.
How do you know that?
Because this is talking about being taken up into heaven, and then so that
So
could be happening after when he's obviously in prayer and his eyes were closed, and then his conversion. But right there is what he's talking about, because he talks about it Acts talked about in his other writings. I consider myself an apostle because as Saul, he was obviously unaliving Christians at a crazy rate. He counts
Well, he
that
doesn't say he was
encounter
unaliving.
as him encountering the physical risen Jesus. That's why he identified himself as apostle. Is a physical.
Yeah.
He makes that
Yeah,
argument
but
as well. If you know through the New Testament, he makes that argument that he did. It's pretty
He never-
elaborate.
He never clearly identifies the what he saw was something physical manifesting.
That's why he
in front of
justifies
him.
himself as an apostle, though.
Yeah, because the Lord appeared to him as well. That's going to be my point. This word, the Lord, this reference that the Lord appeared to me, it's very ambiguous. It could mean something like appear to me in a dream. It could mean something like a vision. It could mean even something like an experience where you're praying and you think Jesus is answering your prayers in the room with you. This reference to appearance is used even in the Greek Septuagint to mean things like appeared in a dream. 1 Kings 3:5 uses the same Greek word to mean that there was an appearance in a dream. So it's ambiguous what Paul means by appeared, and he puts himself with the other apostles where he describes his vision as internal. So I don't know, outside of referencing the Gospels, I don't know why we would think any of these appearances of a literal manifested Jesus is even part of the original story and what they were claiming.
Because Paul does make his argument for why he's an apostle and that his physical encounter with Jesus. Let me pull up the scripture if I can here.
It's going to be
You
1
can
Corinthians
continue on the
9.
questions, but I don't know if we'll get back to that or not.
I think you're talking about 1 Corinthians 9.
I think
it is verse 1.
Let me make sure. I'm looking through the rest of it.
Yeah. But he says, yeah, again, same thing. He says that he saw the Lord.
Oh, no. Dang it.
Okay.
That was fun.
Yeah. So that was the affirmative cross-examination, right? So then huh?
That was Sarah's cross-examination, right?
That was Thursday. Okay, that was opposite.
That was 2 each for us. That was 2 each.
Oh, yeah, that was opposite. Yeah, my fault. That was the opposition. Yeah. So then we move on to the affirmative 5-minute closer.
Oh, it's 5? I thought it was 2. Okay.
Yeah, it's a 5-minute closer. Yeah. So
Okay.
go ahead, sir. You could start.
You don't have to.
Affirmative.
You don't have
Yeah,
to use
no,
all five.
affirmative is sorry. It's affirmative.
I know.
Affirmative is
But,
Verum.
you already know
I'm
me, sir.
probably
You know
not
I
gonna
talk a
do that.
lot, so.
Yeah, no, Verum. Sorry, Verum goes with the 5-minute closer whenever.
What was Sarah gonna say, really quick there, or what was going on?
Yeah,
I was just pointing out that he doesn't have to use the full 5 minutes if he doesn't want to. I don't know if I am, so.
also,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that
Whenever you're done with whatever you're talking about, like we're just gonna stop the timer, you know.
I think Sir should get another minute or two because I did interrupt him a few times there, which I think was just not right. He deserved his line of questioning, and I just, I failed there. So
So,
I'm
Coco, do you
okay
want us to like give like Sir like a little round, like a cross examination, like a 2-minute cross examination?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, you could do like a minute or 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll give
I'm
Sir.
good. I'm good with what we have. We can just do the closing.
Okay, we could just do the closing.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so then the affirmative 5-minute closer. I'll start the timer whenever you say your first word.
Okay, so through this debate, the main arguments for my opponent is that the Gospels aren't trustworthy. And he didn't try to counter anything about any of the archaeological discoveries made that obviously prove the Gospel's trustworthy. He did try to question a bit what textual criticism was when it came down to looking at the actual names in the regions. He didn't attack the regions, he tried to attack the names, and he gave one specific example of one person, but we have multiple names of the Gospels. And just the fact that they're, perfectly accurate with the region, the people in charge, they're always correct. Archaeological discoveries always prove them right. They match what's expected of a first century Judean culture from what we see through all the rest of the evidence. So we know that the Gospels are trustworthy because if they were changed in any of the forms, we would see that change, and then we would be able to compare it to another region thousands of miles away, which would be impossible to harmonize. Again, the gospel stretched across the Roman Empire by the end of the first century, translated very quickly into Syrian Coptic, obviously it was originally Greek. So if somebody changed something within this time period that Sir is claiming, within the first, second, and third century, all of these gospels in thousands of miles apart wouldn't match. So to me, it's just failed inadequate argument to address that major way to see how the Gospels are trustworthy. Because if you try to say anything was changed, we would see the difference. And he gave no argument to really counter that. He just said it was based upon a 2nd century writer, Papias, who everybody based upon. But we know that the Gospels date before that, and the timing just wouldn't work out. How else would these Gospels have stretched this far if they're all based upon a 2nd century writer? It doesn't make any sense. The evidence doesn't fit that. So that last part I really want to talk about. There's a bunch of other things. The trustworthiness of the Gospels is a paramount, but I'm going to skip everything and go back to the Shroud of Turin. Again, I think that's some of the best evidence of the resurrection, physical evidence. People like to see physical evidence. And to me, if you really break down and analyze that, the carbon-14 dating should just be thrown out. We see that there's linen on there. Sir tried to say that there was also some cotton throughout the fragment, but this is, with FTIR, you actually get a signal strength measurement. With FTIR, from my personal analysis in chemistry, you can actually get mass, you can get amounts from the analysis by the strength of the signal. So we actually do that in our industry. And through FTIR analysis, we know that how much cotton there is, and it was in comparison to the amount it would be off in terms of that calculation. There has been hermeneutical calculations done on the carbon 14 test done in 1988. And there's inconsistencies in the data. It goes up and down, but it averages out, right, to a 13th, 12th century. But the numbers are so far askew that it's definitely not homogeneous. It's not straight data that averages. It's not all close. It's further apart, and it just happens to average to that point. So that analysis is done out there. You guys can look that up. And again, the proof for it being a resurrection would be the uniqueness of that burn. It can't be replicated. No other time period. If Jesus is light, if he reveals himself in glory through light, as he manifests himself in Matthew 15, Luke 9, Mark 9, and he's revealed in glory and light. The glory has always been shining in light. Don't you think there would be light and glory shining as he resurrected, as he came out? And that UV spectrum light, that only thing that could match that possible. We can't even make bulbs that, to this point in our scientific development, we can't make enough strength and shut that off at that short time period to even replicate that with our modern technology. How are they supposed to do this in medieval times when they had no technology? Like, there's been many people try this, and all their images are just laughable. You try to compare them to the detail, the level of depth into the linen burn. So the Shroud of Turin to me is just outstanding, amazing evidence. And I encourage you all to look at it, because I know a lot of people have thrown it out, me included. I threw it out because of the carbon 14 data early on. I would encourage people to look into it. The scientific
1 minute left.
the scientific testing done on the X-ray scattering is good science. Again, the technology for the X-ray scattering has been around for 100 years. It's been testing cellulose degradation since the 1960s. To date things, there has been a few others, I don't think they're new, but there's been a few other not as high profile ones that they tested on in the last 10 years. This is obviously the first big major one. That's true, but the science behind it has been around for a long time. And I encourage you guys to look at that. If you want to discuss it, you can discuss it with me or several other people. The science is very, very good on it. As a scientist, I do a lot of this stuff, and I can tell you what's good data and what's not good data. And I can bring you examples and bring up this study tree and go through step by step why it's an accurate way to measure cellulose degradation over time. And then all variables are accounted for. And it's so rock solid. I would just say that's the only way linen should be dated ever. To me, you can definitely do carbon 14, but I think linen X-ray scattering is the way to go for degradation. And it totally matches with the sample. We have known from 55
Time.
to 70 AD.
Time. Okay, that concludes the affirmatives closer. And now we start the timer for whenever Sir says his first word.
So I just want to start off by saying my opponent did agree during this debate that the prior probability for the resurrection is extremely low. And I don't think the evidence he attempted to provide here was probability raising to get over those priors. I mean, we would need something, I think, even better than eyewitness testimony. And I don't even think he's provided good reason to think we have eyewitness testimony outside of Paul. And as I pointed out, Paul is not describing anything that we can point to as external, because he describes it as internal. And when it comes to the thing about Papias, I think maybe he didn't understand my point, which is fine. But with Papias, what I was saying, he was asking me where these names came from on the Gospels, why no one disagrees. And what I was pointing out to him was the first person that mentions them by name is Irenaeus, late 2nd century. Everyone that references them before Irenaeus, Ignatius, Polycarp, the Didache, they all reference them either by a different name or they don't give them a name. Justin Martyr, we see names like Memoirs of the Apostles. We see names like the Gospel of Jesus Christ is a name that's given in the Didache. And no one calls them Mark, Matthew, Luke, or John, right? And Papias tells us that Mark wrote a gospel and that Matthew wrote a gospel, but the details he gives about Mark and Matthew don't match our gospels. He says Matthew was composed in Hebrew, and he says Mark was a disordered gospel that was based on the sayings of Peter, the preachings of Peter, which does not match either gospel. And Irenaeus just repeats this information. So all the people that we have that quote unquote agree with the authorship are just quoting Irenaeus, who's using Papias as a source. And Papias is not talking about our gospels. Now, it might also be surprising that we do actually have some disagreement among the church about who wrote some of these gospels. When it comes to John, we have a group of Christians that said it was written by a guy named Cerinthus. And this is going to be late 2nd century that people are saying this. We also have the anti-Marcionite prologue, which is a prologue that existed in the 3rd century that listed the authors of each gospel. And it says the Gospel of John was dictated to Papias by this other John who excommunicated Marcion. So that puts that John in the middle of the 2nd century. So there's disagreement about which John wrote John, if John wrote John. And with Luke, we have the whole Marcion controversy about whether or not Marcion wrote that text or whether or not Luke wrote that text. So there is some disagreement amongst the early church about who wrote these books, okay? And that was my point about bringing up Papias. In terms of the shroud, like I said, I mean, I don't see how the sort of details we have in the shroud would raise the probability of a resurrection, even if I granted everything, even if I granted it was a 1st century relic, which I don't. But even if I granted that, even if I granted the whole radiation thing and all that stuff, I'm not sure how that did that. Even if I granted the whole radiation thing and all that stuff, I'm not sure how that shows a resurrection. At best, we would just say we don't know how that information got on the relic, right? That's the best we could say about it. It's not probability raising, and it's certainly not probability raising to the point where it would get over his extremely low priors. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say. I think Coco, again, for hosting the debate. I think Ariar for helping. And I think Joe for having this debate with me.
Okay, concludes the closer.
Okay, that was a good debate. Thank you guys both for your candor. We appreciate it.
For sure.
And I guess right now we're going to invite some audience members up for like questions or comments or concerns. And if you guys can stay for a little bit, but you don't have to stay for like too long. If you got to go, then it's fine. But yeah.
I mean, so the order goes Cage asks the question first, then Corey Peterson, and then Busy. That's the order.
I can really hear you. What? Sorry. Oh.
Okay.
Now I can hear you. My bad.
I just have a question for both of you. One for Sir and one for Vizzy or Tree. Sir, do you think that you sufficiently motivated the prior probability within the Bayesian argument in such a way that a rational actor would be compelled to accept or understand the brevity of that type of prior?
I hope so. That was my goal. I mean, I think I did. I think that's why I ran through the sort of dialectic about comparing it to a lottery winner, was just to show, like, on the surface, like, before you start looking at the evidence, how unlikely you think this event is.
Well, okay, just because in an actual case, it's like winning 10 lotteries consecutively in the same month type of probability. But okay,
That would be better.
I
Verum, do
was
you
being
take it
generous.
that Verum, do you take it that you sufficiently motivated the types of posterior variables, if all granted to be true, would overcome such a uh, void prior set of priors?
In terms of what? What subject?
Well, when Sir provided the Bayesian argument, you guys got lost in some of the substance on what the
That was a very
priors,
quick
if
one. Yeah.
true. If you grant that the priors are true, and all the things you wanted to say in the debate, do you think even those all being true, the set of those things being true, overcome the void of, extremely, and that's being very generous using that word, small priors of the fact that Jesus resurrected?
Yeah, to me, it's just the probability. I agree with you. It should have been like 10 lotteries. That would have been like a better way to put it, right? But in terms of like the probability of that versus the resurrection and that negating and putting down the resurrection, it's a supernatural event, which the Bible admits is like a thing, an ability only God has, and it's a one-time thing through the thousands of years of history of humankind. So to me, it's not really negating anything of the argument because it's already a supernatural crazy event that none of us have ever seen before. So to me, using the Bayesian argument against probability doesn't really put a good argument against the resurrection at all.
Corey, you can go ahead and ask your question.
All right, yeah. This is for Verum. I mean, it seemed to me your argument primarily held up to both either because the Bible says so or the Shroud of Turin, which, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to grab it because the Bible says something, it should be taken as reliable. But with the Shroud of Turin, you were implying that like that this image was burned down there. You're aware of like the 2020 study, I think it was 2020, where they have replicated the marks on the Shroud of Turin using entirely naturalistic means, right?
Yeah, I'm worried. They use like a silver nitrate. Is that the one you're referring to?
I believe so. So like this idea
Yeah.
that
So
it had
that's
to be
that. First of all, that wouldn't be available at the time, right? And that what was
doesn't matter.
produced, that guy.
Wait,
I'm
no,
sorry.
so
What?
you're misunderstanding me because, like, let's just say that none of it could be done at the time. You were making the claim that we have no explanation for it, all this other fun stuff. It requires a miracle, but we do. We've already like. Let's just say that this wasn't available at the time, which I don't grant. We still have a naturalistic explanation for the mark on the shroud, and it seemed to me that you just ignore anything that goes against that. Which I'm just pointing out. You're aware.
You had two parts there. Can I address both of them?
Go ahead.
So the first part you said, I just say the Bible says so. That's one of the typical arguments I get through my 20 years of talking with atheists and skeptics is they just say, oh, you're just going to say the Bible says so. No, that's not what I did. I went through and told you why the Bible was verifiably accurate, historically accurate. I said there's been no archaeological discovery ever disproving anything in the Bible. If you have one, please let me know. If there's textual criticism analysis, which is done on all ancient manuscripts that really argues against the Bible, please let me know that, because Bible passes with flying colors in terms of manuscripts of ancient antiquity. Now, moving on to the Shroud of Turin, if you're referring to the silver nitrate replication, the guy stood there for a long time, first off, with that picture. It took forever. And what was produced was like so not close to what was the image on the Shroud of Turin. The depth of it was like not even similar. The detail was not even, so it was literally just these blocky splotches. So it's not even close. Like if you look at any of these images produced, I look at all of them. I'm not just saying, oh yeah, they don't work. You actually have to analyze them. I'm a scientist, and I take everybody's work seriously. And if I look at it and I say that's ridiculous, that is not even close. Anybody can look at these images and see they're not close. You can look at the inverse and look at it and see if that matches in terms of photography. If you look at the negative, does that even look close? And they never do. They're not even close. And the depth is such a key part of it. You're missing it. The depth of burn into the linen is so important.
And this is one thing. Saying I'm a scientist doesn't mean shit, because I know plenty of like people who are scientists in physics who know nothing about and vice
Guys,
versa.
the poll is up. If anybody didn't vote, you have a minute to vote.
I had a question for the guy Dwight Barnum.
You're speaking out of turn. It's Vizzy's turn.
Oh,
Vizzy,
okay.
go ahead and ask a question.
Yeah, so did you say, so this is for Verum, but I also have something for Sir. Did you say that there's no archaeological findings that invalidate anything in the Old Testament?
I did say that in the New Testament, yeah.
Right. Okay, so we have an archaeological artifact called the Cyrus cylinder. And it helped us discover that Nabonidus was the father of Belshazzar. But Daniel 5:2 says Nebuchadnezzar was the father of Belshazzar. Wouldn't you say that invalidates?
I do remember that argument. I have to go back and look at that one specifically. I think I can argue about the timing. There's another argument you can make with that in terms of timing, but in terms of the father, I'd have to go look at that one again. I don't. Yeah, I'll look at that.
The Nabonidus cylinder dates before the book of Daniel. But I'm sorry, yeah, your whole opening argument was just right at atheism, buddy. Yeah, good.
Well, no, yeah. The other argument, in which in terms of the dating and the archaeological discoveries, I've debated that guy before. Basically, the chronology is all based on Egyptian chronology of all timings and datings in the period. I'll have to look into that. He's debating it later too. But no, I can get you that answer.
That Reddit comment was to me, not to you. He was making a joke.
Oh, it was? I was like, oh, like really? Yeah. Like that doesn't even fit with me.
Before Ori and Yuji ask the question, I just want to say one thing real quick. Sorry, Verum, I just want you to know that this channel is highly atheist, agnostic, etc. So the polling doesn't actually reflect who won. I just want you to know that.
I inferred that. Thank you for that. I think you're a great person, so I appreciate you being so cordial with me.
I just don't want you to take from the poll that like you did terribly or something. That's all.
Oh, I know. I mean, you can just read the comments. There's always people. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. You know, not streaming, but debating people, and there's been audiences of various types, and I understand how that works.
Okay, so Power of the Ori, you have any questions?
Yeah, for the Varans. There's no actually evidence that shows that Jesus Christ actually resonated. He never actually came back 3 days later. Yeah, resurrected. There's no there's no evidence that supports that. I mean, you claim that you're a scientist, and I'm a physicist. I study physics and science too, and there's no evidence.
Are you referring to the Shroud of Turin or just at all? You just make a claim. I just spend an hour talking about the evidences for. Are you going to address the specific arguments that I mentioned?
Yeah, the place where he was nailed was crucified, and because I know he didn't come back 3 days later, there's no evidence to support that.
Well, that's what the historical documents that narrate his life tell us. So we can test those. That's what you do in science. If something's a theory, we could test and see if it fits with the evidence we have. And in terms of like the evidence for that would be historical, archaeological, if we can even verify any part of the story. But then textual criticism, which is its field of analysis of any ancient manuscript, would be able to look at that. And does it narratively fit? Does it seem to work out? Oh yes, the Jews, believed in a day started just a partial day, so it was 3 days. That works out all fine. Okay. Everything seems to fit. Historically, criticism, textually wise, logically. So, I mean, there's no way to negate it just by that. If the texts themselves say this happens, you have to falsify the text and say they're not historically accurate.
Yeah, they're not accurate because it
Why?
wouldn't make any sense. Because
Why
with today's technology, that was over 2,000 years ago that he was crucified. And so you can't really live 2,000 years. I mean, no one has ever lived 2,000 years.
Wait, what?
And there's no.
So you're saying, because he's alive till today. Well, he's God, claiming to be God. So if that's true, then that would kind of not make that pointless, right? Actually, Babylonians claim that people live for thousands of years. So are you gonna deny their writings? They said people live for 5,000 years, 2,000 years. You're gonna deny what they say?
Yeah, 2,000 years is when he was supposed to be crucified. He can't come back after 2,000 years. That's why I was curious, was the evidence that can back that up, your claim? Because
Jesus rose from the dead. I just went over for the last hour.
We haven't found any evidence that supports that.
I just listed an hour worth of evidence. Did you want to bring up a specific argument? I mean, do you not remember anything I said? Were you listening?
You were reading about it in the Bible. That wasn't technically evidence. That's just what it says in the Bible.
I listed other evidence as well. What else did I list that wasn't in the Bible?
Well, I came back 30 minutes after you talked about it.
The only historian at the time in the region who was Josephus, but he was obviously after. There was no historian in Judea within 4 BC to 30 AD of Jesus. There's no historian in that area, right? So the only historian that we could see of that area close enough time would be Josephus, and he in fact did write about Jesus. Even skeptics and even non-Christian people, Jewish people, historians and scholars all agree that in Josephus, he does say there's a Jesus. He does say that there's people who are Christians who follow him and that they do believe that he was crucified. And if you actually look, we have the Arabic translation of that, which is, minus the Christian interpolations. I would encourage you to look at that too. And there's also a Syrian translation. But the Arabic is, good strong arguments to believe. Doesn't have any interpolations, so we could see what it originally said.
Oh, we do have to get on to the next questions.
Oh, okay, that's what I was just curious about. I mean...
And I did list the shrouded turn as well.
I have a question for each sir.
Oh, go for it.
Sir, I'm just wondering, what do you think the strongest argument, even if you think they're unsuccessful, is for Jesus' resurrection? Briefly.
I think the strongest argument for the resurrection is going to be if you point out that there's people that claim to have these experiences that were willing to sort of unalive for those experiences. I think that's probably the strongest argument you can make. The fact that we don't have good reason to think they're lying because they're willing to unalive for them, and B, they were claiming to see things that they couldn't have been mistaken about. That's, I think, the strongest case, but I do have, of course, a lot of contentions with that argument as well.
Okay. And then for Verum, in regards to the Shroud of Turin, I actually have two questions. Do you think that whatever properties that you think are supernatural that are part of the Shroud of Turin, like the radiation, I think you said, and other things, do you think that it's possible it could have been caused by a different supernatural event other than the resurrection? And then the second question is, if you think it could have been, why do you think it's more likely to be caused of a supernatural resurrection rather than any other supernatural event?
Okay, so you cut out in the middle there. So you said, did I think that it could have been caused by another supernatural event? And then the second part was?
And the second part was, if you do think it's possible it could have been caused by a different supernatural event, why do you think it's more likely that it was caused by a supernatural resurrection rather than another supernatural event.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I don't think that any of the physical attributes of the shroud are supernatural, because those are not natural. That the effects of, if this was a miracle, right, then what's left over is the physical left evidence, and that's not supernatural. That's stuff we can test and look at. And the details of the shroud fit the story too precisely. And what we do in science is we gather all the data, look at it, put it all together. Upon the preponderance of evidence, the probability is so high that one theory that is more correct. And so the argument that this is the Jesus of Nazareth fits it too perfectly. The story, the narrative fit the details of it too perfectly. Even the American Medical Society did an analysis of the cross. They looked at that in terms of the was talked about in the Gospels, and they said that even matched there. And then we see those same details listed or shown in the Shroud of Turin, the healing, the stab in the side, not healing, the pollen, the other things that verify its region, its time period. Just fit with the two perfectly. So you really narrowed down at who this could possibly be, how many people were crucified, how many people were scourged, how many people had a crown of thorns placed on their head, how many people didn't have any noticeable bone broken on their body, because everybody was, eventually had their legs, broken before they were taken down. And so the probability of it being anything else is just astronomically high. Like it could be anything else. Like there's no way. So to me, if it's a miracle, then it has to be Jesus of Nazareth.
Okay. Does that satisfy the question?
I'm just confused. I don't like. I feel like I feel like we granted Sir's argument being like his inductive Bayesian argument to be successful, and if that's the case, then I need like either a stronger inductive argument or maybe a subjective Bayesianist argument or a deductive argument for the case being true. Because I mean, it sounds like you agreed with Sir's argument. We agree that the priors are astronomically low, and I'm not using that word inappropriately. And we
You're talking
also
about
agree that even when we factor in the posteriors, it's still astronomically low. If we grant that, then what follows from that is that it's more probable that the resurrection occurring is false. Um, so to motivate somebody to not accept that conclusion, we either need an inductive argument that concludes in the resurrection is more probable to be true. Um, but if we already agree on the set of facts that deduce the probability, then it's not the case that that's going to be able to happen. So we need some type of deductive argument that would render that proposition as true. Unless I'm forced to accept the conclusion that it's more probable that the resurrection did not occur or is false.
So I'm sorry, for the first part of it, I thought you were asking Sir a question, and then I started paying attention at the second half. But
Yeah,
to me, again, the Bayesian argument for me, the probability, trying to limit the probability of it being true based upon just that type of argument doesn't work, because we obviously can put other types of arguments such as scientific arguments, historical analysis, probability. To me, the probability of the data saying one thing in terms of just actual data is way stronger than a hypothetical comparison analogy. So you actually have to look at the actual evidence and what does that say and mean. Trying to put a hypothetical comparison against it would have to match it perfectly. The comparison, even of a lottery, doesn't really compare it in a negation type of way to negate the probability of all the evidence, all that. So the probability goes up because of the evidence. Probability goes up because of the trustworthiness of the Gospels. The probability goes up because there's physical evidence we have. It's the Shroud of Turin. I didn't even mention the other face cloth that goes along with it, the Olivia of Oviedo, which matches with the shroud. Obviously, cancels out the dating of it because it has 120 points of congruence with the shroud on the face. We know that the carbon 14 is in fact dated wrong because it matches this 15th
understand all of
century
this.
dated.
When I asked you the question, when I came up here and I asked you the question during that time, right? I said if all of your arguments were successful, so all of that stuff you just listed, I am factoring in as the
I didn't hear that part.
posterior
Sorry. I didn't hear the
probabilities.
first part. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I am factoring all those things in. It's just the case that the priors are so extremely outweighing. Like think trillions of quantifiable data sets, trillions, not
That's wrong.
not billions, trillions, and associated facts compared to like like, even if I want to be charitable, at best, what, 5,000 facts?
Yeah, so it's not negated by the fact that there's not any other examples we can look at throughout history. That's basically what the argument is, that this is such an improbable event. So if there is a supernatural being out there that claims to be able to do this, and it's one throughout history, then that negates the whole idea that this is such a rare, like, that the probability, because it's a rare event, doesn't mean it can't happen, right? So there's
Yeah,
just
that's
no
not what the
logical
argument's
argument
saying.
to make that would say that one-off events can't happen in history. Is there a
That's not what
probability?
he's saying.
So one-off events in history can't happen in your worldview?
No, that's not what Sir is saying. He's just saying, given the inductive case, it's far more probable that this didn't occur. That's all he's saying.
I understand. I totally understand that. But what you just made an argument for, you said trillions of the probability is astronomical. It's just not that if there's this
Yeah, I would hold that in
being
my
out there in the
view.
universe that can do this.
No, I would hold that in my view, if it's the case that I have good, strong, independent, inductive motivation for some events more probably not happening, then I would hold that it's more probable that it didn't happen. But if presented evidence, or like a deductive case that it did happen, be my guest.
Well, I think that's a reasonable thing to do with most cases, right? But
Yeah.
here's one where we have a claim of like
Well,
a textual historical document, actually claiming this is what this person does and this is what's
I
going to happen.
granted all of this.
I understand that, but right, that
So
changes.
why do
the
you keep
whole
bringing it
narrative.
up?
I think there's like some talking.
You can't negate those factors. You just
I
can't.
did.
Wait,
I
I think-
granted
I think
it.
there's
What are we
some
talking
talking-
about? Everything you
Granting
keep
it is
mentioning.
Wait,
almost
I think-
accepting it,
I
right?
think
Because the
there's some
probability holds
talking-
high.
You guys, please.
Go ahead, sir. Sorry.
You guys, please. I think there's some talking. I think there's some talking past each other. So, what I've said and what Cage is trying to elucidate here is that when the priors are extremely low, it requires us to have more evidence to get over those priors. Okay, so if we're starting off with extremely low priors, then the evidence we have, it wouldn't be sufficient to get over that hump, so to speak. You would need more
Yeah, that's
evidence.
really anecdotal.
Is that
That's really anecdotal to me. You have to be able to quantify and make it, and then just because something has, how are you going to quantify a supernatural
granted that it's
being in
low.
terms of a probability analysis when it's all prophesied? With
But
Psalm
you
22.
granted that it's low.
I granted that that happening without God would be low. With God, it's not low.
No,
Wait,
that's
wait,
not
wait,
what
wait,
you
but that's
didn't-
fine.
you
I
didn't
think I
clarify.
said this is what I believe, and that's if it was said any
that's
other
okay.
way, it was mistakenly said by me. I can make mistakes, but this is
That's
actually
fine.
what I believe. Yeah.
But then the debate shouldn't have been, did Jesus rise from the dead? Because you have a prior contention that's deductive in nature that Sir might not
No, it
accept.
should be. That's ridiculous to throw out an idea like that because that's the quintessential question we must ask. If you're trying to
Yeah,
debate
obviously.
something probability-wise, that's ridiculous. In order to throw it out, because we have science, because we have analysis, we have all these other fields.
Wait, what do
That's
you
not how
think
we
I
determine
just
what happened
said?
in the past. We
Wait,
don't
wait, wait.
use
No, I'm
those
not
type of
saying throw it
arguments.
out. Vera, I'm not
Scholarly-wise, we
saying
don't use.
you're
we
getting
don't
really
use those
upset. I'm
arguments
not
to determine
saying
what
anything
happened in
like
the past.
that. I'm
We
not
don't use
saying
those type of
any.
arguments.
I'm not saying anything like that. I'm saying, look, Ferrum, if you don't grant that the priors are astronomically low for this type of event, like you did in the debate, or like we interpreted in the debate, and your contention is that some type of counterfactual, if God, you could do some conditional Bayesianism there. That's fine, and it's still the case that it's low. Because if God, what other people have been resurrected by God?
Yeah, that's a more fair question, right?
That's a
Than-
low no.
It's still
No
extreme.
one's-
This doesn't help you at all. It's still, it
I'm
actually
not
might
trying to
make
make.
it
Well, I'm not
worse.
trying to make that argument, right? I don't. The argument I make is that there's a supernatural being out there who claimed, who prophesies that he was going to do this, can do it, does it when a rare event in history, does it rarely. So we can't expect anything from that.
He did it
And
once.
If I was another person outside my perspective, and this was another type of supernatural, I could understand that. Any other?
He did it once. What do you mean? Like he's not going around.
To me,
He's not like
it is
Oprah.
the evidence that is how we determine history. It's the actual analysis of the documents, seeing if they're trustworthy, is how we determine history. That's.
I think Sir was right. I think I am talking past you because what I'm saying is I'm
I'm
granting
talking
your
about
counter.
it. No, that's not at all. I understand what you're saying. You're just maybe
I'm
not understanding what I'm saying.
granting your Well, maybe that's a blunder on my view, right? I'm granting the conditional. I'm saying, okay, cool. If God exists, then the priors would follow from this, and I don't think that the conditional probability is better. I actually might think it's worse because if it's God exists and it is the case that He has motivation to resurrect. I don't know if you're a Trinitarian or something like that, but insert like some Trinitarian or Unitarian position from there. I think it becomes worse because then it's not just Lazarus and Jesus and all those people that resurrect, which might help the case, like increase the cardinality to 3 over however many humans have existed, like take it to be a trillion or something like that.
It's
Then it's not 3
how
divided by a trillion. Then it's 1 divided
historical
by a trillion.
analysis is done on any of them.
I'm not talking about
We
historical
just don't do
analysis yet.
that. We don't analyze history based upon that kind of analysis. We just
I'm
don't
not
do
talking
that.
about that yet.
Well, that's what we're talking. We're talking about a historical event. Did it happen or did it not happen? And
Right. And
we
you
have
know
to
how
argue
Sir is
from
motivating that?
established scientific methodologies which deem that the most probable, and that's what we argue by. Not
Wait,
through
what?
probability analysis
I
in a
think you're just
supposed
talking. I don't think you're actually
hypothetical
listening to
environment
me.
that doesn't contain all the variables. Your argument doesn't contain all the
Sir, is he
variables,
listening
right?
to me? I don't think
It
he's
doesn't.
hearing the
Well,
words out of my mouth.
You just can't get past this argument because I think it's an avoidance argument to get past evidentiary argument. Like you don't want to debate the specifics of an argument, the facts of an argument. You would rather stick in this hypothetical
I granted all of
probability
your
zone, which
facts.
doesn't include, by the way, all the variables. It's
I
impossible to include all
granted.
the
He's not
variables in
listening to
any
me.
probable hypothetical analysis that you're trying to claim here.
No, he's just not listening. I granted you all of your facts.
No, just that's an excuse to say I grant you that. You have to actually accept the reality of
I'm not
granting
going to
what that
fight you on
means.
it. It can be true. Every fact you want to say, true. I
If
grant
you
it.
grant them, then you have to actually then look at the probability of that all being true,
I-
and it negates any
Yeah.
hypothetical you're then addressing. Don't you
No, it
understand
doesn't.
that?
Yeah, that's what I've
It
been saying.
does.
That's
It
what I've been
literally
saying.
Somebody,
does.
please take
You're
control.
literally escaping the evidence if you do that. You're
Okay.
escaping the evidence. Granting means you have to factor it into your said analogy
I
and then
did.
calculate that in, which you're
And I
not
did.
doing.
Wait, yes, I
You
did.
didn't. What's the
That
problem?
was-
How does it change the probability?
It
Okay,
does
we do have
change.
to
I'll
get
tell
to
you what.
Shark
This
and
was the
Mob,
first thing
though.
Okay, I'll end off with this. This was the first thing I said to you. I said, if we grant all of your facts, best, the probability is 0.2. Now, in order to get over and just be equitable, it needs to be 0.5. To be more probable, it needs to
No,
be
it's not
greater than that.
0.2. I don't know where you get that calculation. I like to see the calculation for that because nobody does these calculations, by the way, for historical analysis. Nobody. This is like such a
That's
wrong
just
way to
not
debate
true.
historical analysis. I see it all over TikTok. I see it, and if people think this is a great way to just talk, it makes people's minds numb. They don't like it because it's not talking about the brass tacks, the beef, right? You don't factor that. When you factor the actual probability of how that changes everything, of all the actual evidence, it throws that kind of argument out of the water. That's why we don't look at historical analysis like that. Nobody does that. Find me any credible scholarly author consensus that says that's how we look at history and analyze history. It's preposterous. That changes the probability totally, especially because the Shroud Turin is such a strong. You gave it a 0.2? Give me a break.
Hey,
Okay,
The Shroud
okay.
Turin is like
Yeah,
highly
Let's
changes
get,
the
wait.
probability.
Let's please let me just host the live. I guess. Okay, Shark, you're next. Go ahead.
Sorry, guys.
I don't have anything important to say. Verum
Okay,
impressed me.
Mob,
Another
you're
person
next.
after
Go
us?
ahead,
Is there another
Mob.
debate after us, by the way?
Wait, I didn't.
You guys are the last debate.
Wait,
So
I wanted to
ask
compliment.
Verum.
I don't have questions. I just want to compliment Verum and Sir. Say you guys did a great job. I love you. That's it, man. All right, calm the fuck down.
Appreciate it, bro.
Wait,
Cheers.
actually, Shark, I do have a question for you. Is that
I love you too, Shark. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
that
welcome, Mom.
PFD you have? Is that a shark being crucified? Is
No,
that what
man,
that's supposed to be?
the shark's in the background, like jumping. You know what I mean? And the crucifixion is happening in front of it.
Oh, okay.
You see it? Do you see it now?
I do now. I thought maybe it was like on top.
I
of
see
it.
that. Yeah.
No. It's jumping behind it,
No, that's
saying
just
like
It's like
raw.
the sequel to Sharknado, and
Yeah,
is this like some kind of crazy?
Yeah,
Come
it's
to
just
Jesus
saying like
Sharknado?
raw. I believe in Jesus. You know what I mean?
Ah, I see. I know.
Yeah.
Okay, Mob.
Mob's gonna
Mob,
say something much smarter than me.
go ahead, Mob. What's your question?
I'm not actually. I missed the debate. I was just wondering, Coco, are you streaming this on any YouTube channel? Like, can I watch
No,
it right now and like rewind back?
Or I am going to edit it and post it on YouTube. I'm gonna get the TikTok recording.
But are you streaming it right now?
No, not at the moment.
No.
Is AR, are you streaming it?
What AR streaming? He doesn't know how to do that.
Oh, I
Stream Air doesn't stream anything. He just sends his content to get stolen by other people.
I'm sorry.
no, it's not stolen. They have an agreement to
Well,
send it.
I have a question for Sir. Sir,
Contributing
do you
to
take it like somebody like me,
I
right?
have one more question.
Oh.
I have one more
Okay.
question. Joe, what was it you said that historians don't use? Like what probabilistic analysis you said historians don't use?
Well, yeah, so we definitely have probability in science, but we don't look at plain hypotheticals, parallels, because there's obviously the shotgun fallacy of the barn fallacy. We don't want to look at hypotheticals in those type of terms. But if you factor in strong evidences, it then becomes a battle of paradigm worldviews in terms of how strong evidence is. So that's why they don't work. You have to present the evidence in a neutral way and allow people to decide for themselves. You put your argumentation in there, fine, it's great. Everybody has biases. We can't get by those. Even in science, as a scientist, for how long it's just going to happen. But the fact that calculating probabilities, like he just tried to do and say it was 0.2, is based purely upon worldview perspective, right?
No, it's
And that's not
not.
how we do an analysis of what happened in history. We present the
I was
data
doing a
and allow people
Bayesian
to
probability.
Wait,
Advocate,
let him finish. Let him
please.
I
finish.
understand that. I understand that.
No, he
But it's
doesn't
not
understand
fitting to
that.
this type of argument. It's
No,
not
He
fitting to
just
this
said
type of
that.
Cage,
argument.
please.
Wait, but sir, he just said that my deduction was
I
based
know,
off of.
Cage, but
You
I
gotta
know,
let
I
him
know, I
finish,
know.
though.
So he's just being stupid. I don't know what to say about that.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm not going to call you
He
stupid.
thinks of some. He thinks I'm
Don't
pulling
take
0.2 out of my ass. Like I'm just some like
Don't take it personal. He's being nice to you right now. I
I'm not
promise.
taking anything personal. No, I actually
like
don't.
what does
No.
he like? You didn't. Okay, so what Mob asked you, what structure of probability was I using, and you said some degree of like hypothetical analyses. Nothing I said was hypothetical because I said, look, grant all the
Oh, I
things that
thought you
you
were going
said
off
on your
CERS. I thought you were
posterior
going off CERS. I'm
probability.
sorry.
No, I said, well, SIRS wasn't even hypothetical. SIRS was Bayesian.
Yeah.
It's in terms of a comparison, right? So you would say compared
It's not
to,
a
yes, it is a
comparison.
hypothetical.
It's
Well,
not
I
No, it
think
comparison.
is.
the comparison I brought up was to establish the priors. That's the reason why I brought up the comparison. It
Yeah,
wasn't,
yeah, I understand.
but I'm still using a
It's not
Bayesian
even a comparison.
methodology.
It's an analogy.
Yeah, I'm telling you, this is not how we look at scientific arguments or historical analysis in terms of something is true or not. We don't do it that way. And people think that, I mean, people get caught in these debates and they think in their head that this is something that can be applicable to the real world, and it just isn't.
So
Because you have to consider the variables are so important, and your
let's
worldview
wait.
is
Let's
so important.
wait. Let's stay linear, please.
Prefer there's like a couple, like Richard Carrier uses Bayes' theorem to argue about Jesus' existence. Richard
I don't
Swinburne
know who
uses
Richard
it to
Taylor is. Yeah.
argue
What does he
from
do? What does he do?
uh, Carrier.
Is he a scientist, archaeologist? Is he a textural papyrologist? What is he? What is he?
He's
Yeah,
he's a historian. He's a classicist.
yeah, he's both a historian, a scholar, and a philosopher. And then
Is it
Richard
one of his
Swinburne,
main?
huh?
Is it one of his main points of arguing how a certain event in history is?
Yeah.
He uses Bayes' theorem. Swinburne also uses it.
Swinburne.
I have to look into it and see
I
if
was just
how
gonna
they're
bring that up.
using it,
Yeah.
whether they're excluding
He's just
obvious,
charging me for no
information
reason.
support.
I
You can't
feel
just
very
I
offended.
grant you all those and then put my opinion in afterwards that it's not probable. Like
It's
it's
not
like
my
okay.
opinion. Why
It
do you
really
keep
is.
asserting?
You just
Why do
say
you
Hey,
keep
it's so
asserting
real
these
low.
quick,
things? He
Rar,
keeps
You literally
asserting
have to
Rar,
these things
inject
as
your
if he
Rar,
keeps asserting
Rar,
these things as if what
You
he's
just get
saying
mad.
or knows what
Rar,
he's saying.
That's the brass
It's
Rar,
like
tacks of it.
saying he's
Rar.
like it's like when
Is
I
this the
use
last
math
debate?
and I conclude.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it
Yes,
is.
All
sure.
right.
It is.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry. Amen.
Okay, holy. We have so many. Like you guys. I mean, let's keep it linear and quick.
Man,
I
that's
mean,
I'm
why
good
I'm.
trying
lord.
to.
Yo,
One
sir, this is
round.
why I'm roaring, man. Cage is yelling at
All
him.
right.
Those
That's
are
Baron,
why.
vicious
you know.
All
words,
right,
man.
Bob. Did you have any
Wait,
other
I'm
follow up?
yelling
Did
because
you have
he's
any other
charged
follow up?
me with like 3 different claims,
Did
all of
Mob?
which he doesn't
Mob.
understand.
Yeah, we gotta let the other
Mob.
people go
Did you
and
have
get their
any? Did
questions
you have
in.
any
That's
follow
the
up
way to
questions?
win an argument.
Mob.
You don't understand it.
Oh my God. Why are you guys still
I'm gonna
going?
I'm gonna
Please.
roar
Mob.
again. Don't you make me roar.
Mob. Did you have any follow up questions?
You have any follow up questions,
No,
man?
I just wanted to know if and when I can watch this. Like, will it be uploaded tomorrow?
He uploads it to YouTube, bud.
Yeah, I'll get it back
You're
tomorrow.
talking to Coco probably next month sometime. All right, Dwight.
Yeah,
All right, you're next.
probably in a week or like.
I gotta get going here in a little bit. Probably like in the next 15 minutes, but
Yeah, I'm trying to get through the questions so we can.
It's
get
your
all
turn,
the
man.
questions.
Don't make me roar.
I'm here, bruv. Okay, so the shroud. We're probably not going to agree on whether it's good evidence, bad evidence, whatever. But I'm very intrigued by this Jesus lasers theory, but I don't understand.
what Jesus lasers? What Jesus lasers?
Maybe that was Dave. Oh, that was Dave. That wasn't you. My bad. Anyway, so so where are you getting? So okay, sorry, my thoughts are scattered because.
It's okay.
Art,
Just
what was
pick
up?
one. Pick the one in the middle.
Hold on,
Pick the one
hold
in the
on,
middle.
hold on. So you're a scientist. You understand that light is made of what? Particle.
Oh yeah. So we have obviously we have photons, but it's a spectrum too of light, and this spectrum of light is on the UV range.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, and lasers. Well, you didn't say lasers, but radiation.
I didn't say lasers. No,
It's going to be
This is-
a different
yeah.
spectrum of light, right? So when Jesus says, "I am the light," what exactly are you taking that to mean? Are you taking that to mean that?
Oh
that he's
gosh,
some sort of
you're asking things that the
that
Bible
he's
doesn't
some sort of
explain, so I
radiation?
don't really know.
Well, let me just
Sorry,
finish the
go
question real
ahead.
quick. Do you take that to mean that he's some
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
go ahead.
radiation, that he's some sort of spectral light that's outside of our range? Because I don't understand how.
It'd be interesting to find
So,
that out.
well, that
Yeah.
was kind of a prologue. I apologize. So the question here is why, and I think Sir addressed this adequately. Why would we expect there to be any type of radiative heat, right? Because that's what we're really talking about. We're not just talking about photons.
Well, heat is a natural product of it, right? Of the enthalpy change of what happens on the contact of the substrate, right? That's just what happens,
If it's
right? If there's no
radiative,
substrate
if
there,
it's
you wouldn't
radiative,
expect the
right?
enthalpy
Not
change
if
to
it's just
happen.
mere photons.
Well, you wouldn't expect there to, the heat would be implicit upon it, but it obviously is released upon this, substrate, the fabric, right? And we see the effects of that.
Is there any other account of heat being exuded with any of the other accounts of resurrections in the Bible?
So we don't have any of shrouds of
Well, not
Lazarus or anything
shrouds, but
like
we do
that. We
have
don't know.
accounts where, for example, Jesus
Yeah, but we
takes
don't
the
have we
hand of the
don't we don't have
child, right?
Lazarus.
Doesn't he take the hand of a child and say,
We
"Rise"?
don't have any evidence for that. We don't have evidence for that though. Like we just have we
He's
would just say,
saying, do the accounts need to
every
be
miracle doesn't have physical evidence,
All I'm
right?
saying
So
is the accounts that we do have. Is there any type of description of radiative heat, like this extreme? We're talking about. So what they talk
you're
about,
expecting
what
scientific
they talk about,
language
well,
from
what they talk about with what's
uh,
needed for this type of imprint to happen on the shroud. It's an intense, like, what is it, like 2,000 megawatts of energy
it's a lot.
for a billionth of the
It's a lot.
second. Is there any evidence or any description of any of the other accounts of resurrection in the Bible
Well, we're talking
exhibiting
about
that
unique
type of
resurrection. We're
heat
not talking about
flash?
yeah, you guys can keep going. I understand
Okay,
your
go ahead.
question.
I'll shut up.
Yeah, so this is a unique than the other resurrection stories, right? That were God's bringing that up. I don't know if those created light, but we do know that God described himself as light, and then that's the light that was at the beginning of the world and the light of men. And when Jesus glorifies himself, like I described there in Matthew 17, Mark 9, Luke 9, that he's shown in glory and light, and he scares James, John, and right there, and Peter, who are there with him. So to me, there's like obviously those ideas, but in terms of this precise event, it's all based upon those ideas. So we have assumptions, like you have to make a theory on it, but we have no other comparison in terms of parallels to that anywhere in history that we can look at. A human resurrection just isn't going to be the same. If God qualifies himself totally different from us, we can't glorify ourselves.
No, I get that. So with the lack of evidence and the lack of details, or at least the lack of accounts of this type of radiative heat, why would we expect the probability to be raised for a resurrection hypothesis rather than?
I mean, that your probability again would be based upon your paradigm, like I said, because people, as a scientist, I see this every day. Like people look at a thing and they'll come up with a different conclusion, and they could still use good science analysis, but it's just there's that interpretive part of historical science. If you have an event in the past, you don't have a video, you don't have a photograph. There's nothing we can go on, but what we see in today's world. So you have to have some speculative analysis there, and then we have to use interpretive measures with assumptions, and then try to build a probability based upon data analysis and then characteristics of that we know, make up a theory, and then people for that, and then we'll have to decide, right? If you want absolute 100% silver bullet evidence, God just doesn't provide that, only to certain people throughout history, and that's his objective. He actually states that's what he wants to do, right? So the fact that there's not a silver bullet argument you could point to, I mean, the Charlie Turner is damn near a pretty good argument, but it's not even a silver bullet argument, right? There's no silver bullet arguments really you could point to throughout history.
All right.
Besides if you had video or pictures.
Just one last thing. This isn't a question. I just want to say, great job, both of you. You're very kind, Viram. Sir, you're obviously, a rock star in my eyes. So, great debate. I enjoyed it. This was the only debate I was able to watch tonight. So I appreciate it from both of you and from Coco and Mr. AR. So thank you all.
Okay.
That's great, man.
Absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you for being here.
All right. Wait. Go ahead. Wait with your question, please.
Have anything?
Yeah.
For being here.
All right. Wait. Go ahead. Wait with your question, please.
Have anything?
So you're just up here taking up space on the panel?
Dylan.
Smoky Jesus.
Okay, that's cool.
Base taker.
Totally cool. Afterwards,
Okay.
Yeah.
After party.
All right.
Yeah. If you want, Joe, I can give you a list of both Christian and atheist historians that use Bayes' theorem to assess historical facts, if you want.
Oh, I mean, I can look that up too. I can look that up, but if you want to make it easier for me and provide that, I'll take a look at it. Sure.
Yeah, but even if
I do like to see how people conclusions.
Let's say we had no historians that did this, it's still clearly a method to determine posterior probability of an event. So I don't know why it would matter if historians sort of catch on to using this sort of probability method.
Well, it breaks down, right? It breaks down when you bring in the evidence because people analyze evidence differently. It really does.
No, well, the whole point. Yeah, I agree with you that, perhaps you'll disagree with how the evidence is being evaluated, or maybe you'll disagree with the priors.
Of course,
that's
the nature of disagreement.
That's what the debate is about, right? When it comes to
exactly. So that's what we should debate about, not that, because we're going to have if we argue about
Joe, please.
Yeah, you understand what I'm saying. I don't even have to say it, right? You
no,
just
Joe,
understand
please
that.
listen. The point is that if I'm presenting a Bayesian case and I'm saying these are the low priors, and I don't think the evidence is sufficient to get over those priors, the only thing Cage was trying to point out to you was that you weren't really addressing that part of the argument. You were just worried about focusing on the substance. Well,
again, that's an opinion that they don't overcome the priors, right? And I'm telling you that they do, right? So, if you have such unique evidence that is it loads out, how does that change somebody's probability? It's based upon their prepositions. It's based
I don't think it's unique evidence.
How they view the world. It's 100. It always is. You can't do any historical analysis without inserting a preposition, a worldview paradigm. You can.
But I did.
There's just no
it's
way.
Not unique. I gave you examples such as the Mormon case, where we have a similar situation where we have people claiming to live.
That's still my opinion.
To die for it, etc. That's not going to be.
A Mormon will say something different than me. I mean, that's still my opinion. I have a worldview. I can't even say that 100% like that. That's what my way is accurate there, right? Because I don't have all evidentiary support, but it's pretty strong.
Nobody up here is saying 100% the resurrection didn't happen. I'm not saying that anyway.
No, I understand. I totally understand.
It's an inductive
to say it's not is an opinion, right? And to say that I view it this way is a prepositional analysis.
I didn't think the resurrection actually took place.
It's almost like inductive arguments don't yield truth values deductive. That's crazy.
Yeah, Ori, well, a lot of people on the panel agree that the resurrection didn't take place. Not everybody, but Whit and Joe think it did. But the rest of us do agree the resurrection didn't occur. So that's all I'm saying is that no one's arguing it's 100% certainty.
Nobody's saying that. But what I would have liked to see you challenge, the reason I asked you the questions I did is because you agreed with Sir, or at least seemingly did, that the priors were low. And then when I asked you my question, it seemed like you had signed off on saying, yeah, of course, it's a supernatural event. Of course, the posteriors are going to be low as well, which is to grant his argument. So when I came up here and I presented that, what I wanted to hear you say was, no, in my view, the priors aren't low, such that the posterior evidence, if these priors are true, greatly overcomes and makes it more probable. But that's not what happened. That's why I was disappointed.
Yeah, so I could totally agree with somebody who views the priors being low if they accept the fact that it's not God, right? If it's a human, right? But if you start bringing in these factors, which I did when I said I agree. If I was a person who was a skeptic and atheist, I would think the priors were low too because I have to prove God. You have all these other things you have to do before you get to even that step.
Wait,
that's what I'm saying. It's
false.
like you're missing so many steps. You're just looking at one singular event out of context. The context is the whole history that happens before that. These all change the probabilities. There's so many factors in this that aren't counted. I mean, when I say variables, you just don't factor them.
Oh my God,
in.
I'm an atheist and I
just,
accept the resurrection occurred, Barum. I'm an atheist and I accept that. Why?
If you accept that, then the analysis takes a whole different. You actually have to
Listen,
consider.
do you want to hear why I accept it? Because I'm a non-naturalist about the world. That still doesn't grant God existing or anything like that.
Yelling.
The reason why you keep saying, if I'm a theist, then the priors are going to be high. That's not the case. Because obviously, if you're a theist, you can be a Muslim and think the priors are low. That has nothing to do with the equation.
I didn't say theist.
You said if God existed. No.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the
Let's try
Judeo-Christian
to.
guy
Yeah,
who's, you know,
it's not
obviously
even the case
claims to
either.
have resurrection power.
You Jewish people
Has
don't even
resurrection
agree with
power.
you. This is so stupid.
Okay.
Okay.
Like,
Well,
why are you
I
making
don't.
such a level 2 blunder? Like, what is this?
It's not a blunder. It really isn't.
I grant you think that.
You're very emotional about it. I think you should just like discuss it with me. Like,
Okay,
better.
here's the
I think that you're
discussion.
very
Here's the
young.
discussion. Here's my points. Point
I
one.
mean, do people want to hear this? I mean, first off, like I do got to get going.
Okay, well then,
I
if you
got
have to
3
get
minutes
going,
left.
then that's fine. I understand you don't want to have a conversation about it, even though you just asked me to, right?
I just had an hour-long discussion, bro.
I
and I took
grant you're
another
mentally
45
tired.
minutes.
That's fine. I
You
grant
can't
that.
stream
needs to
every
go.
night.
That's fine.
I mean, I go live 3 or 4 nights a week. You could totally come on and debate me on this further. I'm okay.
I don't
do this
think
kind of
that
stuff all
would
the
be a
time.
very productive use of your time. I think it would be better spent learning Bayesianism.
If you yell and just like interrupt, I don't understand how it could be productive either.
Yeah.
Wait, I didn't say me talking to you wouldn't be productive. I said you talking to me wouldn't be productive. Given your
I
time would be
understand
better
you're
spent
trying
learning
to
Bayes' theorem.
passive aggressively insult somebody, but that doesn't make an argument.
No,
Man.
it was very
think-
aggressive. I am intentionally
think we-
trying to insult and demean you.
Well, you didn't say it directly. So if you don't say it directly,
Sorry,
it's
I
passive
think
aggressive.
you're
You
an
understand?
idiot that needs to learn about the subjects you're
There you
speaking
go.
of.
But that's actually a name calling. You didn't actually have to say it with a derogatory term. You could have
I
done it
didn't
differently.
use a
I think you're
derogatory
wrong.
term. I used
Well, I
an
think we've
insulting,
said it all.
disrespectful
You don't
term.
think idiot is a derogatory term? Okay, then
No, I
you
don't.
just don't have a good frame
I
on
think
reality.
we've said it all.
That's
I
fine.
think we've got it all.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, sir,
All right.
I'm sorry. This guy charged me with using Bayes' theorem incorrectly or somehow not understanding the certain
You know, if you
variables.
just
But
keep
he
yelling,
doesn't
it doesn't make
know.
your point better.
But he doesn't know what Bayes' theorem is, right? And he also doesn't think he made the charge that historians don't use it that way when it's the case that quite a few historians use it that way. Then the third
Do you
charge he
talk in
made,
this tone and pitch all the time? Like, do you
yeah,
talk
if
like
you
at a
mind,
lower
This
level?
if
is
you mind being
typical
quiet,
case,
you might
yeah.
learn something. So the third point he
Say that
made
again.
was that if if theism is true, then the priors are high. That's also false.
Oh boy.
And was the
Like, so the
evidence
three
that
charges
God
he made,
exists when you guys were talking
well,
about
no, that
God?
doesn't even follow. The three
Let's let
the
somebody else
three
talk.
charges he made were completely false and dumb. Now, I would love to hear how they're not dumb.
This is not how you win any argument.
Are we done?
I agree with.
Where?
Like,
What's
if I'm a Muslim, I think the priors for the resurrection is high. If I'm a Muslim, like clearly not. If I'm a Jewish, do I think the priors are high? If I'm a
Fair,
Jew,
I
no,
think you
clearly
can
not.
probably just grant that the Bayesian analysis is low and it still happened. Like, who gives a shit?
well, where?
Oh yes, please do that.
What's the?
No real
Why don't you
problem
just-
with
Please
why
it.
don't you
fucking
talk
do
at
that.
the end there, man.
Please,
Like,
I
hey,
dare
why
you.
don't you talk like that all the time? You had a very low tone, and you weren't high pitched, and you weren't yelling. Why don't you talk like that all the time?
Why don't you talk like a less condescending prick yourself? Maybe we could have a
You have
conversation.
been condescending to me the whole
Goodness
time.
gracious, guys. Like,
Wait,
stop.
the reason I was condescending was because you took back and recanted something you said in a formal debate. What a blunder.
Oh yeah, that's true. I don't even know if that's true or not.
Fair, I'm just
It
saying
is
you
true. You
blundered.
I'm willing
granted the
to be wrong about something I said, but like I don't even know if it's true or not.
Fair, I'm just
Oh,
saying
so
you
this is what
blundered.
happened. The first thing you said was,
I did.
I
I said I
grant
could
the
have blundered, but
priors.
I don't know for sure.
You said, I grant the priors are low. And then after the debate, you said, no, I didn't actually say that.
Did I not just explain like what my framework would be? Like, were you
Yeah,
listening to me?
No, not in the debate.
You
You
did
didn't.
explain it. You did explain that.
I did.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
was
contending if you
listening.
explained it after the fact. That's not the contention. The contention is
All right,
you
come
can
on,
All right.
conditionalize
I think
it.
our brains can only
Who
handle so much.
fucking
You know, like
cares?
frequencies to your brain that like do certain things
Wait,
to your
can
brain.
you
Like my
both
brain
just
is like,
Can we both
oh,
just?
it's
Can we all
heating
just
up.
What would
stop?
you like to talk about, sir? What would you like to talk? Go ahead. What would you like to
Yeah,
talk
well, I
about?
mean,
What,
just good
like
lord,
the weather?
what's up with all this fighting? Holy hell!
I don't know.
Like,
I'm
you want to
so
talk about the
confused.
fucking weather? You want to talk about cars? What do you want to talk about?
I'm so confused.
Well, what I want to
Gambling?
know,
What's up?
yeah, I want to know, Verum, what's your name mean? What's that name mean, Verum?
So it's I used to do this when I did debates back in like a long time ago on the internet on like Talk Origins and PBS Evolution Forum. My name was Verum, and I would debate people all the time. But so it means it's Latin for truth. Obviously, a lot of people use Veritas, but I wanted to because there's so many people with Veritas. I decided to use a different form of truth in Latin. So I used.
And what's the Christmas tree for?
Oh, that's my. I come from the Northwest, so the chemistry I do is primarily a lot affected into the forest products industry. But there's so many forests in Oregon where I work. You know, I love forests. I love going out in the woods, and obviously, I love
DK, this is the kind of discussions we want to have in the after party. It's chill, okay?
right.
I really care about what fucking trees he's frolicking with. I'm sorry.
I used to work for the Oregon Department of Agriculture, so I used to like test all kinds of plants, and I protected Oregon from the Phytophthora ramorum disease that destroyed California forests.
I'm
So
gonna
I care
ask
about.
you, sir, about this in about 3 days to see if you remember if you actually cared or not.
Well,
That's a hard thing to remember, man. I'd give him a break on that. I just said a bunch of
I'm
stuff.
gonna remember what the name means. It means truth.
It's almost like it's like you could fucking read that if you just know a tiny bit of Latin.
Well, I don't know a tiny bit
Real
of Latin.
quick.
That's why I asked.
What
Real
you
quick,
on, bro?
Can we get mob?
It's
Up?
like
Can we get mob raised?
reading
So
Ori's name.
irritated.
Feels so good.
Yeah, Cage.
Yeah,
Listen,
yeah.
Cage.
You know what?
Such
You know
a,
what OI? You know what OI
Cage,
means?
you used to be such a sweet boy.
Before
Like,
you
what-
patronize me, before you like condescendingly patronize me, sir, I want to remind you of your interactions with Bart. All right, just before you're about to do that, go ahead.
Sir.
What about it?
I have
What
a
do you want to
video
know?
of you two. I have a video
Guys,
of you two
guys.
literally screaming at each other for 10 minutes
We don't need
straight.
to let this get messy. Like,
Mob has a
So
question.
before,
Well,
just so we're clear, before
Mob
you're
wants
about
to
to
ask,
patronize
how
me and
dare
call
you?
me an asshole, I want you to understand your
Nobody's
prior
doing that,
behaviors.
Cage. We're
When
just
did it? Why are you so?
messing.
Why are you so
Cage,
angry? Today?
you're a beautiful soul, bro.
Yeah.
What happened?
Like,
You
are we
seem
all
so
going to
sweet.
pretend like A, Sir hasn't acted this way, B, Wit hasn't acted this way? I think the only person that
Nobody's
hasn't is
pretending.
Dwight.
We are all assholes. I just think you're a little irritated and you need to calm the fuck down. That's it. That's all we're saying.
You're just
Wait,
like
what?
a little bit
I'm
of a bigger.
irritated. I'm irritated because one, this guy granted. Yeah, I grant that. We're irritated is because he granted Sir's argument and has the audacity to be like, "Oh no, it's still false." Or what follows from Sir's argument? Well, what follows from Sir's argument is the prompt being false.
Yeah, I know.
That's what follows.
You're just being a little neurodivergent.
Well, can I ask my
calm
question?
down.
And you know what OI means? OI means origin. I couldn't put origin in, so I had to put OI on it.
Bob, what's your
for the
question?
What? Who the hell
Well,
are you talking
I have
to?
a question for Joe.
Or he's got the riz, bro.
I have a question for Joe, but I first just want to say I don't really like how Sir is kind of rude to black creators like Bart. I think we should give him space here.
Oh, for fuck's sakes.
Anyway, Joe, yesterday.
I'm sorry.
I mean, the prior probability is definitely higher with his interactions with me. So I mean, there's that.
Joe, yesterday you talked to Planet Peterson and you said something about the zircon crystals and some like hydrogen dating method that dated them to 7,000 years. I'm curious what the method is because I've never heard of it before and I wanted to look into it more. If you remember that part of the conversation.
Called fart.
Don't listen to him. Joe?
I think. Yo, Joe Sinks. Verum.
He may be busy. He's done with you guys.
Guys.
Oh.
See what you did, Cage?
Helium
In the comments,
crystallization.
fart.
I'm actually pretty happy with myself
Right
right
there.
about now.
he's
Thank you
going
for
through
that.
technical difficulties.
You ruined a friend for all of us because you didn't want to be his friend.
I don't want to be friends with fucking idiots, sir. I grant that.
That's so
Hey, let's not do that.
Yeah, Cage.
But is that false, Coco?
But I don't want.
Do you
this
have
to go
access to
nowhere.
my naive mental states, Coco?
I just kind of want to keep this friendly.
Why? This is okay. My bad. I'm sorry. Verum, how was your day today frolicking in the trees? I really want to know about your like avatar, blue people dating of trees type shit. Go ahead.
Don't answer that, Verum.
Shit, he's not here. My
He's
bad.
not
Fuck
being
me in
serious,
regard.
Baron. Don't answer.
He's trying to trick you. Don't
Yeah.
answer.
No,
He
that was
doesn't
as genuine
care.
as I get. I even made an analogy to a popular movie reference. That's the best
Cage,
you're
I want
getting
you
from
to
me.
rank. I want you to rank everybody on the panel in the order of intelligence.
Oh, Jesus.
Highest to lowest, go.
Mob 1, Dwight 2,
Double you.
AR 3, Ori 6, Verum 5, Sir 4, Coco 7. No, 8. Sorry, 8.
Fair enough.
I'm like in the middle.
I agree that Mob is one.
No, I said Sir 4.
That's like
I
the
didn't-
middle.
I didn't rank Wit because, I mean,
Oh, no.
I don't I kind of just forgot
Oh, my
that women
God.
had
I'm so
speaking
sad.
rights.
Wow.
I'm number 6.
Well, I'm like the
so
I'm
ask
like
him.
the I'm like the meat in the intellectual sandwich.
I just hear Ori saying random things sometimes, and then it's like I don't know how to track. I mean, the reason
Wait a
you
minute.
talked about his name was because 2 minutes prior I mentioned his name.
I cut you off. Why didn't you rank me again?
Well,
because you're
I
gay.
just forgot that women had rights.
I was telling you why my name said Oi on it, so you know it
Wow.
means
We
origin.
we can only rank you among other
What
girls.
does
It's
women
only
having
fair. We
rights
can't.
have anything to do with my intelligence?
It's not fair. We can't
Then you
rank
wouldn't
you
have the
among
right to
guys. We have
speak.
to.
I do
We
right
have to rank
now.
you among girls. We can't rank you among guys. It's just not fair.
Oh, okay. Well,
Don't we have the right to silence, not the right to speak?
all right.
Well, I guess we
You
have the right to
forgot
protest.
yourself.
He just
I
can't
think you
give me
forgot
like
yourself
any. He can't give me any credit.
in that ranking.
I'm not
You
ranking
should at least
myself.
be.
I don't have
You
that
should
big
at
of an
least be
ego.
2.
No, I don't want to be on the list. Take me off.
Wait, you
If you notice,
everybody on the panel of level of intelligence go.
Mob, DDG. I'm not going to say the name because I think it has to do with the penis. I don't know what's going on there, but that name has to. That he. Oh, you just replied to him. Never mind.
EDJ?
Double donkey.
Yeah.
You can say donkey on TikTok.
What's the J stand for?
Oh,
Jesus.
it's talking about Jesus' trip to Jerusalem. Never mind.
It's talking
Yeah,
about
exactly. Double donkey Jesus.
You have
Never
a
mind.
horrible
Sorry.
fucking mind.
Sorry.
Okay, sir, it's your turn to rank everybody by level of
No,
intelligence.
I want to shrink.
You want to shrink?
I'm embarrassed. I'm going to shrink now.
Okay.
That's a
Okay.
terrible defense mechanism.
You didn't
Let's
know.
see.
You don't know much about the New Testament, sir. So it's
Ranking
understandable.
everybody in order of intelligence. Okay, here we go.
Keep in
So
mind
the
it's
most,
Pride Month.
the most,
Wait,
Wait,
who's
who's
gay
the
on the
bride
panel?
person?
the most intelligent person on the panel, I think, is Mob.
Ugh.
Okay,
Grant that.
I think
I
Mob
grant
is
that.
super smart. Number two, I think is Cage actually, even though
grant
he's kind of
that.
a jerk. But. Number three, I'm gonna go Dwight.
Oh,
I grant
Jesus.
that.
Number
You
four,
don't have
I'm
to
gonna
call me
go
Jesus.
Wit.
Just call me Dwight.
No
Number
way
four, I'm
Wit
gonna.
wins over AR. No way.
This is my ranking.
Oh.
Wits over AR for sure.
Number four, I'm gonna go Wit. Number five, I'm gonna go AR. Number six, I'm gonna go Verum. Number seven, I'm gonna go Coco Debates. And number eight, sorry, Ori, but I'm gonna have to put you at the end of the train.
Oh,
Did you
Ori
know
has the
energy
most riz,
cannot be
though.
created or destroyed?
that's
Ori has the most riz, though.
Listen, Ori, you're a cool guy. If we're ranking who's the coolest, you're gonna be a lot higher.
oh, that
Like
guy
you're
try to
definitely,
be.
Say number one.
I try to be the coolest I can be, but thanks though.
you're definitely above Cage there and the coolest, and that's really what matters. The coolest.
I mean, you
Is it
guys are
though?
pretty cool too. That's why I like hanging out with you guys.
I mean,
That's, I
Oppenheimer
mean,
was a dick that unalived millions of people, but he's still in the history books.
Mob, are you being serious that I'm above AR?
huh,
Yes. Yes.
you're,
Oh,
you're above
Yeah.
AO.
that's nice.
Why you
But
don't?
I
You don't
think
think
Wit,
you are?
I think Wit's pretty. Honestly, I think Wit's pretty smart.
Even I think AO is pretty
I
good.
take credit for that.
Yeah, Cage.
She's just like
It's my
wrong
fucking
about
fault.
literally.
She
She
said
just
no
happens to be
because she
smart.
did this.
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
She just happens to be smart and wrong about everything. That's all.
I grant that. I take it that her ability to form an argument is due to my incessant bullying, and that's like an empirically true question. Even Rasul asked for my help, and I have screenshots to prove it.
What screenshots?
I have a screenshot of Rasul asking me for sources to help develop
Bro.
his view on
When the fuck
primitive
have I ever asked
epistemologies.
you for anything?
What do you ask
Okay,
me? What rules of
wait.
inference were?
Cage.
When was
When has
that?
that got Rasal?
What? Where did it? No. He just
Not
asked
that it's
me.
your fault. Not that it's your fault.
He asked me like a week ago for where he could read about the different categories of epistemology, and I told him you're not asking for you're not asking for epistemic views. You're asking for meta epistemological views, what it means to know something. And I gave him sources in the last week. I don't know how he's been behaving. I hope he's read something.
I bet he has.
So,
I think
so do
he does actually read. I told him to
do
read
any
the SCP too.
do any of you guys want to debate me? Like we could set up a debate, and you guys can debate me about something.
Sir does. He was talking about it before.
What?
Because I haven't
He
found a
wants to
debate
debate.
going.
He said
Sir was
his
talking
debate
mad shit
prompt is
about
going
you,
to be
bro.
God versus science.
You should
Yeah,
He
debate
called you a
debate this
nine.
guy Christian Carl. You should
I don't
debate
know
this guy
what that
Christian
means.
Carl. I
Like,
think
why
he's
am I like? I don't get the debate prompt.
there's this guy Christian Carl that's been looking for a debate partner, or you should
I will
see.
debate Christian Carl.
Christian Carl is like
I'm
a
just
top
looking to
debater,
see
though. Just be
who.
careful.
Christian Carl's probably a Protestant.
We should just do a Christian Carl. No, Christian Carl's actually EO. I heard.
I feel like that's
Is
blasphemy. I don't know about
is
that.
he a catechumen?
No, he's actually
Oh,
he's
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 part
a
of the
Unitarian.
church.
I found this on the web for Is the Cans Human? Check it out.
Sorry, what?
Is someone
Dwight?
going to drop for Bop by
That
Blood?
was Siri.
Dwight, who you got
I
over your
drop for
house over there,
John
buddy?
only if he admits that his
I got
meta-ethical
this
view is
sexy British
false when he
lady
gets up here.
called Siri.
Where did Cage go?
Where did Cage
Everyone
go?
wants a shot at Christian Carl. Look at that. But Christian Carl, by the way, is still ducking and dodging me.
Well,
so
why
I should
would I
get first
debate
dibs at Christian.
Christian Carl? Because we believe the same thing.
So can I get a recap of the earlier debates?
So I guess I
didn't
was
get a
supposed
listen
to
them.
say my meta-ethical view was false? Is that what I was supposed to say?
Who?
Look at John with the 1.73K.
Wait, John?
Damn.
John's a moral anti-realist, though.
Was I
Aren't you,
supposed
John?
wait, Cage, was I supposed to say the words my meta-ethical view is false? Oh wait,
Yes, say
I just
that.
did. I just said the words. I did what Cage asked.
We did kind of get you there, Cage. I mean, for all the intelligence you have, you weren't able to get one over on John.
Hey, John, I feel like because you got 40% of the vote in a heavy atheist live, that just means you won.
I think
That
I'm
was
missing
pretty
context.
impressive.
I don't care. Listen, hey, the debate was a W. It was a very good debate. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you fucking rocked it.
That debate was very good. I think both people presented very strong cases for the view. Yeah.
If only you just would like stop being wrong about all the other stuff.
Hey, what about you,
John, are you
Reds?
Unitarian?
Am I Unitarian?
Yeah.
No,
No.
he's a monarchical Trinitarian,
Oh, okay.
which is also
that's
another
what he
thing
was
we agree
That's what
on.
we was talking about.
Wait,
He was
can
wrong
I
about-
can I point out
was wrong
something
about
about the
that.
theater
Wait,
stuff? That,
you know what? If I had to rank
Not
people like the funniest on the panel, you are number 7 right now.
Wait, I want to ask John a
unkind to
question
me,
about.
though.
That's not true.
I want to ask John a question about the Theoda stuff because it didn't get brought up, and I do think it's kind of interesting, and I wanted to know what he thought about it. John, is this still on your brain, or are you okay talking about it?
Sure.
John, did you get sleep?
So
He's
Did you
tired.
take my advice?
wait, hold on.
Hey, Whit. Would you debate me? Because I'm just looking for someone to have a debate with, man.
What are we gonna debate on, bro?
Well, are
Phil
you
Yokway.
Sir
are you a
didn't get to
religious
ask his
believer?
question,
Like you
and I
believe in
feel really
Jesus
bad.
Christ?
Yeah, I believe that Jesus is God. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, we could debate about that. We could just set something up.
There you go.
Whether
Yes.
Jesus is God or not, you're gonna get
I have to
wrecked.
go. I just had an emergency. One of our baby chicks just died, so that's why I was.
Aww.
Oh,
I know
sorry,
it's stage
Verum.
10 emergency. It was little Banty chick too. It was so cute. I tried to revive it, 101 Dalmatian style with heat and a little bit of CPR, but it didn't work.
Sometimes that works. Sorry,
Lord
man.
have mercy.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Sir,
Well,
go ask
on that
him
note,
time, bro.
thanks,
All right,
Coco.
bye,
Thanks,
Verum. I
everybody.
think you did really
Good night,
well.
Verum.
Thank you.
Christos and Nestle.
Alright.
Bye bye.
Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
for
Sir, love you, man.
please-
Thanks. Appreciate the debate, man.
Well,
Just come back
I'm
and
not gonna
talk to
say
me
I love
later.
you, but yeah, come back.
Yeah, I
But I'm
do.
not
I
gonna
do
say
actually love you.
Thanks, Coco,
Well,
for letting us
well,
come
sir, I
in.
love you too.
Absolutely.
Not
yeah,
as much
everyone,
me.
no more love. No more
Thank
love.
you guys for
Okay,
being here.
John.
I'm gonna be here for a while.
John.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so in Antiquities, when Josephus lists Judas the Galilean, okay, in Book 20, he calls back to Theodos after Judas the Galilean. So it looks like, let's say Luke is kind of reading through Josephus trying to find names. It looks like in the order, like I could see someone reading that and in the order think that Josephus is saying that Theodos that revolt occurred after Judas, and that happens to be the same order that Luke mentions them in, which contradicts the order that Josephus gives earlier in Antiquities. So don't you think that's just like a really weird coincidence?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, we talked about this before, I think the first thing is the notion that I'm not convinced that it's the same Theodos.
Oh, but you granted that in the debate, though. You granted it was the same person.
Yeah, I granted it for the sake of the argument, but it's not like...
Oh, so we're back on
Notice
that.
I
Never mind.
granted it, and I said even if it was the case, I can just grant that Luke made a good faith error.
Yeah,
But I'm
but it's
not
just weird. I mean,
the reason I granted it in the debate specifically is because if it's the case that Theodos, like let's say there's like a ton of contradictions. Contradictions do not equal second century dating. And so me conceding contradictions was meaningless to the topic.
I think to me, though, when I look at like sort of the Josephian parallels in Luke, I think like when I look at it, it just screams of like literary spotlighting to me, where he's pulling from stuff and trying to reincorporate it in his story. Like we see this with Canarius, we see this with the Jewish revolt leaders, we see this with the Sakari. Like all these references, it seems to be.
But the weird thing, what makes it weird, and this is the point I mentioned, why, if he's borrowing from Josephus, why does he get it wrong?
Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one,
here's what we know about Luke.
There's a couple reasons why he would do that. Number one, he needs Theodos. He needs Theodos to occur before. All right, maybe it's Judas. I'm thinking of. He needs one of them to occur before.
Well, I was talking more like the Quirinius objection, really quick. Like on the Quirinius objection, why would Luke, on your view, get the dating of Quirinius wrong if he is using Josephus as a source?
He doesn't get it wrong. The only way you can argue he gets it wrong is if you read him in conjunction with Matthew. But obviously Luke doesn't care what Matthew says because he directly contradicts Matthew on several occasions. Okay. Especially when we're dealing with the virgin birth. So I don't understand. He's clearly not concerned with following what Matthew's saying. So from Luke's eyes, he's presenting a well-established chronological account of what happened. And he's not concerned with matching what Luke said. Or sorry, with what Matthew said.
Hey, and Matthew and Luke, when Mary gave birth to Christ, how old was she when she actually gave birth to Christ? Matthew and Luke,
neither one say. So.
And by the way, the case I presented is pre-Josephus as well. So like the case I presented tonight it's not the case that Luke could use Josephus because Josephus wouldn't have been written yet.
What are you talking about now?
I'm saying based off the case I presented tonight, it wouldn't.
Oh, you're saying if we accept like a late 60 dating for Luke?
Yeah, so if we, so that's what I was defending tonight is specifically like an eyewitness account reported of like Paul as a companion of Paul.
There's just way too many problems with that, though. I think.
I don't think there is. Debate me right now. No. Get my computer out.
I mean, I will.
No, I could debate you. I mean, I'm looking for a debate. Looking for someone to debate. Man.
It's time.
Yeah. No, I think it's the case that, if anything, there's either a common source to which they both could be utilizing.
That can't be true.
No, I mean it can be.
No, they disagree on too many important details.
But it doesn't matter. So, like, if we say there's a third source in which they disagree on important details, or we say that Luke is using Josephus as a source and they still disagree on important details, like, there's not really going to be a symmetry breaker.
Well, because the argument for people arguing for the parallels aren't arguing that Luke is concerned with recording history accurately. He's concerned with pulling from known historical events and using them to interweave them with the story. It's a theologically motivated work, not
Yeah,
a
but
historically.
that doesn't add anything theologically to it.
Sure does. He has Gamil given a speech, and he needs both revolts to have happened. If he follows the dates that's given in Antiquities, one of those revolts wouldn't have happened yet, so we can't mention them in this debate.
Why
and
why do you think he needs one?
And because what? Wait, what?
Yeah, why do you think Luke needs a revolt to happen in order to represent something?
Because he's using those as examples of Jewish revolts, and it just so happens that the only 3 established Jewish revolts that Josephus mentions are the same 3 that Luke pulls and uses. He uses Theudas the Galilean, Judas the Galilean, Theudas the magician, and Theudas the magician and the Egyptian. Those are the 3 revolts.
I mean, that was my contention.
If there's no other revolts that Josephus mentions, there's no other revolts he can pull from. So he needs all those revolts to occur before Gamil's giving a speech. Otherwise, Gamil can't mention them.
Yeah. So on the Theudas note, I challenged that in our private conversations that it's the same Theudas based off of the description. So
yeah,
the
that's
one
a
that's
different conversation. I mean, I'm just saying if
I mean it matters to the context of this, because if we're saying that there's a borrowing of Theudas, but it's a different Theudas, then there's no borrowing, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So Judas the Galilean, that one's also pretty vague. I think in the text it represents more of this is why it matters. If it's a different Theudas.
Thanks for the heart.
And we say those are completely separate, and then we take Judas the Galilean, and then he's representing Judas the Galilean based off of Josephus, in your argument or something, or he's using Josephus as a source, or Josephus is using him as a source, whatever.
Yeah.
Then there's not going to be a contradiction if the only thing we're comparing is the Judas the Galilean revolt and the Judas the Galilean revolt from Josephus. The order is only going to be screwed up or reversed if Theudas is involved.
Yeah. Well, the biggest issue I would have with this being 2 different Theoduses, and I think I brought this up to you privately as well, is that if it's 2 different Theoduses, it's just really weird that Luke wouldn't clarify that he's referring to one that happened a long time ago and not the one that happened more recently.
Well, it's like I said though, Luke, from my view, he's not.
Can you shut the fuck up?
What the devil? Who are you?
You bitch ass.
Wait, no, I'm excited now.
No,
I got excited.
No,
wait, come on, talk to me. Talk to me. Come on, Papa.
Can you please shut the fuck up?
Yeah. What do you? I'm not gonna do that, but I'm interested in why you want me to now.
Because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, bud.
Okay, ask me a question.
Here we go. Let's go. Bring it.
This has nothing to do with the gay community.
Okay.
Gay.
What? No one's here is gay, I don't think.
This has nothing to do with the gay debates.
Yeah, it does, because it's June and it's gay week.
Wait, this has to be
4
slurms.
weeks.
No, but
Wait,
I
this
can
has to be
tell.
slurms.
I can tell. There's a couple of flamers here.
This is slurms. I can hear the inflection. He's using the same inflection as slurms.
No, just flamers. Flamers. Are you guys gay?
This can't be Slurms. He's Canadian.
Are you guys gay?
Praise God.
No, I'm not gay.
You're
I
not
don't
gay.
think.
I'm gay.
Bro, we're all flamers up here. What are you talking about?
God
What do you
bless
have
you.
against
I
flamers?
appreciate that. I also like getting fucked in the ass.
Okay.
Good, because it's Pride Month.
John got dropped too. Did John get banned?
Damn. I don't know, but if people are getting banned, I'm going to go to Danny's live.
No, that's
What's going on?
I don't know. Danny's live.
All right, Coco. I think I'm going to take a debate break for a little bit because these things stress me out.
Okay.
Great job, sir.
Just don't get fucked in the ass.
Why not?
I'll try to prevent that
Maybe
from
he wants
happening.
to.
Yeah, I'm just.
I'll try my best to protect my asshole.
Watch your cornhole, Peterman.
Bet.
All right, bye-bye. I'm
Bye.
taking off too before I get banned.
All right, Coco,
Hop to
give
some
us a
other lives.
reasonable estimate. When will this be available on YouTube? Mom wants to know.
Yeah, and probably in the next 2 or 3 days.
3 or 2 days.
Yeah.
Okay, Coco, when's the next day of debates?
Next week on the 13th.
Who do you have scheduled? Who's on the slate?
Let me check. There's a couple people I have to add to the slate.
Well, who do you got so far? Let's get a pre-day of debates advertisement going.
Tiny Smalls versus. Actually, no, that was last event. Sorry.
So, what kind of debates you have for me? You haven't found one yet?
No, I haven't found one yet, but
Well, let me know when you do, though.
or if you can find one, let me know.
All right, Coco, who do you got next time? Let's hear it. Come on, Coco. Let's get this advertisement out before people leave.
Tiny Smalls versus Voice of Reason.
Tiny Smalls versus, is that like an evolution debate?
Yeah, is creationism true?
Is creationism true? Tiny Smalls versus Voice of Reason. Okay. What else you got?
Cease to Know versus Mendoza on Are Trans Identities Valid?
Okay, we got a trans debate between Cease to Know and Mendoza. That should get hostile.
Yep. And then
What else you got?
Godless Engineer versus Jules Setcase on Does the Christian God of the Bible exist?
Godless Engineers debating on your platform?
Yeah.
Wow. Godless Engineer versus Jules. Does the Christian God exist? Okay. I don't know who Jules is, but okay. Who else you got?
And then maybe Theo Life versus the Joyful Apostate.
What eyewitnesses to Jesus?
Yes.
Well,
That's a pretty good stick, guys.
I don't really think the Christian God actually exists because time, space, and matter can't be created or destroyed. Like energy, matter, time, and space all comes together. And nothing within that can be created because the universe was never created.
All right, Coco, I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Yeah, I'll probably go hop around some lives. Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it, and that will conclude the debate.
Hey, thanks, Coco, for letting us come up and hang with you.
Yeah, for sure.
So, who else? What else you gonna have? Just have a hangout chat now?
Or I'm probably gonna hop around to some lives and check them out. Or if anyone wants me to stay, we could have a hangout chat. We can talk about anything.
I know. I mean, it's up to you. It's your live. I was just curious what you.
Are there any fun lives going on out there?
Hey, you want to hear something cool though? There's a microscopic wormholes opening up in the emptiness of space. Like little tiny microscopic wormholes. According to gravitational waves, the fragments of space-time itself, we've finding little tiny microscopic wormholes opening up in the fragments of space.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah, because gravitational waves, Einstein's theory of general relativity. Well, Einstein theorized that because of using general relativity, you have gravitational waves. And within gravitational waves, we're finding interesting things about the universe.
Oh. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, here, let me hop down. But yeah, I'll see you guys around.
Ah, okay. I see you.